All right. I guess I'm live. I've got my fancy outfit on to navigate live patterns like a pirate. So, yeah, I'm going to pirate this up. We have a new camera setup. Not sure how happy I am about the camera setup. But, all right. Here we go. Everything's ready to go now. And we've got links up. Okay, good. I think I'm in good shape. So yeah, welcome to navigating live patterns because we're gonna do it live. We're gonna navigate some patterns. I've been thinking about a lot of stuff, and maybe I'm gonna talk about that. Maybe I'm gonna talk about something else. If you want to jump in, the link's up there. And it's been a busy week since the last live navigating patterns, and a lot of stuff has come up, right? So we sort of went from the tolerance theme over to the back into leadership. That came up a bunch this week. I don't know why. It just a bunch of people wanted to talk about leadership in different contexts and from different places. A bunch of people I hadn't met before. Ran into a bunch of people on BOM who wanted to talk about stuff. Um, uh, people being recommended. Oh, you got to talk to this person. You got to talk to that person. Right? All those things are happening. Um, so that's interesting. And some of the themes I've been working on are not just leadership, but I want to do a video on finding frames and the different framing. And a lot of that is just finding a good example for frames, right? So one of the problems is that, and I have a couple videos on frames and they're okay. They're okay. I'm happy enough with them. I'm not complaining. But I really want to get a really good, clean examples. Every once in a while, one flashes into my head, and I'm never at a point where I can write it down. Um, but I really want to get a framing example where I go through these different frames and actually show how much different the same set of facts can look from different frames. And I'm just struggling. I've only been trying to do that video for a year. So it's not like, yeah. And, like I'll be on Clubhouse and somebody will say something and they'll just flash. I'll be like, aha, that's one angle. And then by the time I get to write it down, it's all gone. All gone. Very sad. Uh, and the other thing is, this anger and resentment towards getting things done. I mean, you see a lot of this. It's anger and resentment towards the current system. It's anger and resentment towards people doing new things. It's anger and resentment towards really just anybody trying to build. And I think it's tied up with judgment. I know Jordan Peterson talks about judgment. I think that's actually really significant. The idea of judgment and what's wrong with judgment. And I think that people feel judged by actions going on in the world. And if other people are successful and they're not, they get upset. And think, well, okay, maybe you should get upset. But who should you be upset at? The person doing the thing, or should you be upset at yourself for not doing things that you ostensibly want to do? And I think that's part of the problem is that aspect of judgment. So yeah, I've been thinking about all those things, and it's not clear to me, what to do about the problem of judgment. I ran into this problem I run into this problem all the time. I run into this problem a lot lately, which is I'll say something about some particular situation that whatever, something that happened to me or a friend of mine or whatever, and then people just like, "Oh, why did you say that about me?" Or, "Why are you judging the world based on?" And I'm like, dude, I'm just telling a story from my personal experience. Like, it's not making proclamations about you or the world, or I'm just literally saying, hey, this happened. Isn't that wild? And people are just like, no, it's all about me. And they're so wrapped up in their own mental prison. They can't break free and realize not everything's about you. Honest, there are things in the world that have nothing to do with you whatsoever. And I think that's been a trend. It's been a very strange trend. I don't know what to make of it. It's a very odd trend. And it's been getting worse. It's been getting a lot worse. And then, so I've been rewatching Andromeda, which is just a lovely sci-fi show. It's so much fun. And Andromeda was done by Gene Roddenberry. And it's got some of that Star Trek original classic Star Trek ethos to it. Um, but man, I had forgotten. I just literally just finished episode 2 again. I probably watched it. I've watched that whole series at least 2 times. So I just finished episode 2 again. And Meaning Crisis all over the place. It's like, oh, Meaning Crisis. I forgot how Meaning Crisis was actually in here. And they've got the Nietzscheans and the Nietzschean philosophy and all kinds of interesting stuff that I had sort of forgotten about. It's been a while since I watched it. And yeah, this Meaning Crisis has been below the surface for a while, and I watched this wonderful video on fonts by this guy Struthless, and the video is a little too jarring for me actually, but I don't know what drew me to it. It's called "I Promise This Story About Fonts is Interesting," and he linked fonts and the development of fonts to changes in society. And I was like, wow, this is kind of like the Anadromist, Bern Powers, one of Bern Powers' YouTube channels, and linking sort of the music and the art to the changes in society. But he did it just with fonts. It's a short video, it's like 30 minutes or something. And yeah, I don't know if I'll engage with more of his stuff just because there's lots of jump cuts. And he's a character, which is fine. I'm kind of a character with my little spyglass on and stuff. Um, but I found his story very compelling. I thought it was interesting that, and it's got like 560,000 views. It's about 3 months old. And I don't even know what drew me to it, but it was an interesting to see these patterns unfold and see this guy, oh, here's fonts, and here's a change in society, and here's another font, and linked it to the art of the time and everything. It was a cute video. It was very interesting and intriguing. And I like seeing other people noticing these patterns. Uh, any kind of patterns. There's a lot of patterns I don't notice. Like art is not my thing. Not that I don't enjoy and appreciate art. And like, look, I used to go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston all the time. Which, in case you don't know this, but you really should, because otherwise you're just an uneducated troglodyte. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, which is literally across the street from, well, a little bit more than across the street, but right across the street from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, is the best museum ever. I can confirm this, and that's all you need to know. It's lovely. It's a house. It's Isabella Stewart Gardner's house, and just filled with all kinds of interesting. It's an eclectic mix of stuff. Very beautiful. I got to see it years and years ago, but I get to see a concert in there once. Unbelievable. Like this little tiny. I mean, it was designed for this, but little tiny area. Relatively small because there's all kinds of big venues in Boston that you can go to, and beautiful sound, right? And I forget what they were playing because music is that kind of music is not my thing. If it's not Beethoven's sixth, fifth, or ninth, then I don't care. Um, or Stravinsky, the Firebird's pretty good. Uh, it's a unique little museum. It's very nice. I've been there many many times. Beautiful pictures, beautiful courtyard. It's got an indoor courtyard with late is it late 1800s I think skylight. So it's a square building, right? There's a courtyard in the middle, except it's covered by a skylight because Boston and winter and snow. Um, and they flowers year round, absolutely gorgeous. All tile on the outside. Bottom floor is all open to the garden. It's gorgeous. You can see pictures of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum online. They're just fantastic. I have a ton too somewhere. I don't even know where they are. But seeing those patterns like in the art, which is something I can't do. I kind of wish I could, but that's not my thing. And seeing other people see these patterns and surf these patterns and notice these connections is very interesting because to me, those connections are the significant thing that we're sort of looking for, that we're after, when we're engaging in the world. Like this is where the reality meets the road, if you will. And it's kind of a big deal, at least from my perspective. I mean, that's why it's navigating patterns, and that's why we're doing it live. because it's a big deal to find these connections, to see these patterns, to interface with what's going on in the wider realm, right? What's going on in the world. And when we uh, when we look around and we see connections and we sense these patterns, we have to be careful not to use it as prediction. So this came up on BLM oddly last night. Very strange. It's been a strange week timing wise. Weird things are bubbling up at weird times from weird places. I was talking to somebody who was stuck. He was, oh, well, we're in Genesis and we're at this point in Genesis. So the next thing that's going to happen is, and I was like, no, nope, nope, that's fatalism. The next thing that's going to happen is not known, and it can change if you bother to change it. Yes, you, and not just you, but also you. First, you, because where's the most control? The most control that over anything is that you have is with yourself. Like that's where you have the most control. So you change you first. You clean your own room first, right? And you go out from there, as Peterson says. It's important to realize that just because there is a pattern there does not mean that it is allowing you a prediction of what will happen next. And when we get too complacent in that, we screw up. So yeah, we have to be careful of that error because it's an easy error to make it. Look, lots of people make it. So like don't beat yourself up over it, but also be on the lookout. So it's sort of important to engage with. And the utility of patterns is not always clear to everybody, right? So like what is the pattern of leadership? Right. And you notice I keep talking about leadership and not leaders, because leadership is a role and it doesn't have to be done by one person. It doesn't have to be located all in one person. It doesn't have to be done by the same person. And it's this squishing, this flattening of the world that we keep doing that all leaders, I know what a leader is. It's like, well, no, you don't, because there isn't one leader or one type of leader. That doesn't exist. There's many types of leadership, and they can be embodied in different places at different times by different people. Not a problem. And it is that sticky, messy interaction between is and ought that people seem to be squishing and ignoring and not really paying attention to. And that's sort of what I want to highlight, is that the patterns are not existent entirely outside of us. These patterns are impacted by our interface with them, by our relationship with them, by what we do. And that is a horrible responsibility, to be sure. But it's also great that we have some influence over these things. When patterns begin and end, which patterns we transition to, these are all things within our control. And I think all of the great wisdom traditions, at least the ones that I've read, seem to indicate that. Like, I don't even know what the confusion is. Everybody says like, oh, we've got to merge east and west. East and west are the same, guys. Okay. There's a different emphasis in the east from the west. Whatever. It's all the same. Really, it really is. Like, actually, if you read it and you pay attention, because apparently a bunch of people tell me they read it, and I'm like, I don't know what book you read, but it wasn't the Bhagavad Gita. I don't know what book you read, but it wasn't the Buddhist texts. Like, where are you getting this stuff from? And that goes back to the projection, the anger and resentment. Like, people want the world to be a certain way, and they're projecting themselves into these stories, right? And they're saying, aha, it justifies my scientific worldview, or whatever. But no, also no. And it's sort of hard because our framing's wrapped up in this. Like, the frame that we use to understand leadership is important, right? If we understand leadership from the frame of materialism, then we're going to locate it in a leader and say leader did bad thing and therefore leadership bad, because we're not differentiating the leader from the leadership, right? I mean, this is part of re-enchanting the world. This is part of, I know you don't have to re-enchant the world, it's already enchanted. Get that. But you're re-enchanting the world for the audience, for the person that's paying attention, hopefully. And that's not a reliable, consistent thing. I get that. But you still got to do it. Like, you can't go, oh, well, it's not reliable and consistent, so we're not going to do it. right? We have to try to re-enchant the world for the people for whom the world is not enchanted. For the people who are lost and say, capitalism is keeping me down, or capitalism is causing all these people who would otherwise be good to do bad things. It's like, thanks, Rousseau. But Rousseau was wrong. So no, still a no. These things are important. And it's important that we realize that our framing is holding us back. Not in all cases, not from everything, because framing also enables things. But sometimes changing your frame is really helpful, right? And that's why, I mentioned this before on a live stream. Paul VanderKlay, I got my buddy Jefferson. I'll just call him out again because I just love Jefferson to death. He's so awesome and so smart. He'll take 20, 30 minutes to come to a conclusion on something, but I'm not sure that if he did it any shorter, it would land. Like, I'm really not. And sometimes he definitely gets off on things that he doesn't have to talk about. But I'm not sure that that's unhelpful. And let me just grab some tea here. Since my throat's been bugging me, I don't know why. So one of the tricks that whatever, I'll go with it. One of the tricks that Peterson plays, right? One of the things that Peterson does is he'll start his story and he'll go off on all these tangents, and then he'll tie it all back. And every once in a while, it maps a meaning, he'll get lost. Where was it? Oh yeah, right. And he does that at least 3 times that I can think of, maybe more. I've only seen maps of meaning 3 times, so memory's not so great when you've only seen it 3 times. But he's always tying it back. So going on these sojourns and making these connections, and not just getting straight to the point. It's not a story. It's not a parable or an allegory, but it seems to do something to the otherwise sterile, dead scientific information that helps you to remember it. And you can say, well, Mark, that's pretty wild and far-fetched. No, it's not, because it's how our memory works. The more connections we make, the better we remember something. That's what the memory palace is about. If you don't know about the memory palace, go learn about the memory palace. Memory palace is great. It really helps your memory. It doesn't work for me at all, by the way. That's a different problem. First of all, my memory does not suck. And my memory and I have been in many an argument about why it sucks as much as it does. But actually, my memory is quite good. I'm just unhappy with not having an eidetic memory all the time the way I want it. But I do not have an eidetic memory. Every once in a while, I can see things and remember them perfectly, but never what I want and never, on command. The Memory Palace, Moonwalking with Einstein was the book that I read. I thought it was great, actually. I've since burned it because I'm burning all books. That's the thing. And basically, it's really interesting, right? The more connections you make to colors, to spaces, to sounds, to smells, the better you'll remember the thing. And you can use that to your advantage by creating Memory Palace and tying it to the alphabet and tying it to numbers and things like that. And, making these elaborate rooms that you walk through to remember things by putting them in the rooms. There's different strategies, but it's one of the things I liked about the last sort of Sherlock Holmes series was that they did the Memory Palace visualization in that series pretty well. The one with Benedict Cumberbatch, I believe is his name. Yeah, interesting stuff. This connection, these sojourns, sort of kind of off the beaten path, but that tie back in, that seems to be a very powerful way to get a message across that isn't a boring lecture, right? Not that I don't like a good boring lecture. In fact, I've been especially engaging lately with some YouTube stuff, and they, let me tell you, blah, 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 the history of blah, and I'm like, oh my God, stop. Please stop. Just tell me the thing. You had a list. Give me the list. Like, just stop. But a lot of people find the advanced articulation, really, really helpful, and I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that for sure. There's something to it. Like, it's a trick. It's definitely a deliberate sort of attempt to hijack your memory and make sure you remember maps of meaning or make maps of meaning. And I think actually that's what meaning's tied up in. roughly speaking, is the like ability to, damn, I keep hitting this thing, and it's not the most comfortable toy, but it is fun. Ah, there we go. That's perfect. Um, the ability to make meaning is tied up in what John Vervaeke calls religio, or connectedness, or relationship, right? So all the things we're making in this meaning are tied to that. And yeah, it's interesting too, because I came up with a definition, or a potential partial definition, for domicide, and that's sort of when you lose your connectedness to your historical grounding. However that happens, like you lose that sense of relationship between you and your past and your future, etc. So I thought that was an interesting sort of an observation. And trying to make all of these links is really what we were talking about earlier in the earlier live stream on Jacob's channel, is really about figuring out what this corner is and what it can bring and what it can do. We have more tools. I said this in the first not the first video I did. I did a video with Vanderklay a little over a year ago, probably a year and a half ago now. I think that John Vervaeke gives you a science of meaning framework and some language, some jargon, some not jargon, that allows you to understand Jordan Peterson's work better. And then allows you to build tools. So again, like, do I watch Awakening from the Meaning Crisis and Awaken from My Meaning Crisis? No, I think it should be called Awakening to the Meaning Crisis. Awakening from the Meaning Crisis is more his meditation series and the Cultivating Wisdom series that he did, I think. Because they're enacted, their practices, he talks a lot more about practices there in a practical way. Awakening from the Meaning Crisis is hard, really hard. It's harder than a college lecture by far. In fact, I think it's probably the hardest lecture I've ever listened to, and I've been listening to online lectures for an awful long time before most people knew about them. Plus, I audited classes back in the day in some very well-known schools in Boston. So, yeah, I'm familiar with hard lectures. That one's really hard. And what you get out of it is not necessarily tools for you to use tomorrow, but pointers about the historical, the philosophical, the psychological, and the cognitive science aspects of what constitutes the meaning crisis, which is all great and well and good and helpful. But that gives you a framework for building tools. It does not give you a framework for unburying yourself from the problem of a meaning crisis, in my opinion. Now, meditation series, that's a whole different story. I love the meditation series. I know they've been redoing John's YouTube channel. I took down the sits, but they're coming back. I've been informed today that they're on their way back. The sits are wonderful only because, yeah, lessons are great, but actually John did a Q&A after each one, a little mini Q&A, and those Q&As from all the sits, I mean, this is where all the magic happens. Like, the magic didn't happen in the lecture. The magic happens after the lecture with the TAs, right? The magic happens in the Q&As, and that's very true for the meditation series. And that was so rich, and I found it so helpful. And also, I get called out for being wonderful several times by John, which is very nice of him. So look, double motivation, right? Which motivation is more real? And they're both real. Another deep confusion we have when we flatten the world. Oh, this happened, therefore that must be what the intent was. I don't know about that. There might have been other intents that were also fulfilled, or it might have been an accident that happened. Who knows? We run into these patterns all the time, and we don't recognize them. We want to live in a rational world. I'm also thinking of doing I've been toying with the idea of doing this video called "You've Been Lied To," right? Very, very provocative. And I might do that. I'm really considering that. I gotta get Elon Musk and Twitter video done. I'm gonna do that today, but I don't think that's gonna happen. We'll see. We'll see if I have any energy left after I do this. Besides, I usually do my videos on like Fridays and Tuesdays. Fridays and Mondays is usually when I record. But yeah, there's so much potential out there to talk about leadership. And I learned a lot because Jefferson, of course, said something yesterday about leadership. And I was like, oh man, raced over to the computer and wrote it into my notes for my leadership video that I've been working on for some months now. And I do spend a lot of time with these things. I mean, I don't sit and ponder them all that often. Sometimes I do. Most of my time is just, oh, I noticed that. I got to go write it down before I forget, right? Or, oh, we had a conversation and then I saw a link. I'll go write it down. Or better yet, somebody like Jefferson who's brilliant makes some brilliant comment. And I'm like, aha, well, that's a good insight. I'm going to steal that. Yeah, and I think being able to exemplify something like Elon Musk and Twitter is going to help with the frames video because it's going to show different frames for sure and different ways of looking at things. We've just squished everything down so much. It's like, I can't, it is so painful to me to listen to people, especially on Twitter, using his own platform, going, well, Elon Musk is doing this and that, and he, this is a bad business move. And I'm just like, okay, let me just pick people in business who have successful businesses who I'm going to critique. Musk isn't on that list. Like, I like to critique people. I won't critique Musk's business acumen. You're a Muppet. Like, you're a mega Muppet at that point. You're an ultra Muppet or something. I don't even know the depth of your Muppetry at that point. And the fact that they don't see what he's doing is even funnier to me. It's like, you're making fun of Musk or, deriding him because you're ignorant. That's actually why you're doing it. It's like, and you don't even know that because you're ignorant. You don't know what you don't know. It's unknown unknowns. And that just cracks me up. Like, stuff like that cracks me up. But you see these patterns. These are common patterns for peopling. I'm not a fan of peopling, by the way, but Paul Vanderklay was like, oh, but if they didn't people, all the wonderful things wouldn't happen. And I was just, there's Vanderklay throwing a wrench into one of my plans. I had it all. I had it worked out. I had the fix, the solution to everything to stop people from peopling. Problem solved. And here comes Vanderklay. No, you can't do that. Telling me what to do. He's telling me what to do. I'm not telling him what to do. Yeah. We could have had a better world, but Paul Vanderklay ruined it all. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But you can see these patterns that people play out. Who is it? Chris Kavanaugh. He's one of the Decoding the Guru guys. Man, he makes some dumb statements. Like, the guy is like, dude, you need to read a book about a thing once ever. Like, sometimes he just says the dumbest stuff, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And I've gone back and forth with him on at least one occasion, and I was not impressed. It was like, you seem like you just don't know what you're talking about. And I'm sure you had, like, everybody's got something where they're an expert at it, right? Everyone's got something they know something about. Fair enough. But he's way out over his skis. Like, he's talking about things that he's another one critiquing Musk. I'm like, really, dude? Musk played you like a cheap fiddle, and you don't even realize that happened. And he's being wildly successful. Which is just, and everyone's like, no, he's not. Because in my mind, I predicted he would not be. Therefore, it can't be happening. It's like, yeah, okay, that must be it. Hint, that's not it. It's a strange world we're living in. There's a lot of projection. There's a lot of anger and resentment. When you've got a predictive model and it served you for years and it makes a prediction and that prediction doesn't come true, and it's the model you depend on to understand the world, very upsetting. I get it. But also your problem that you need to fix for yourself, right? And it is a problem. It's a problem. And that's why I think, the You've Been Lied To video. I mean, I think that would be important. I'm not sure how well it would go over because the thing you've been lied to about is your own autonomy and your own capabilities and your own rationality and your own level of self-control. Those are the things you've been lied to about. Everything else is you've been lied to about. But those are the primary things. And, I've said this many times before, and I guess I'll go ahead and say it on YouTube. There are a lot of people, and I do mean a lot, who have been told, uh, indicated to, given accolades for being several orders of magnitude more intelligent than they are. And we are suffering for that. We are suffering for that because we have told people that they know things that they do not know, that they can understand things that they cannot ever understand, like no amount of education, right? There are limits to people. I don't know what they are. I'm not pretending that, but I think they're a lot lower than we're pretending they are. I'll tell you that much, at least for most people. And that is not serving us well. That is causing all kinds of problems in the world. It's causing problems around our media. It's probably causing around our politics. It's causing problems around our entertainment. Um, I mean, I think Critical Drinker does the best job of pointing this out, especially in the entertainment industry. Like, whoa, who's taking over the writing chairs here? Like, do they not know how to write a story? And apparently the answer is no, they literally do not know. They're not competent writers. Fair enough, not everybody's a competent writer. I get it. But also, why are they in charge of doing writing things? Like that's so then you're getting competent leaders, right? Like, oh, so the leaders didn't notice. They're just picking bad people in some cases over and over again and not noticing. Well, that's bad. These are bad patterns. What do we do about that? We get rid of the bad people. We don't tear down the structure. Can't blame the structure for the bad decisions of the bad people, why ever they're bad. Like they're bad because they're ignorant. They're bad because they're actually dumb. All right. They're bad because they're not good people. They have a bad agenda. I don't know. I don't care. I don't care. People dig into the details. I'm like, you're just digging into details to avoid taking an action. Like, it doesn't matter which of those three reasons. Get rid of them. This isn't hard. Incompetent, fire them. Ignorant, fire them. Bad actor, fire them. Still the same solution. You can go, oh, but then they won't get better. Well, they're not going to get better if you don't fire them. You can go and make them better after you fire them. That's fine. Go do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fire them. Don't worry about the rest later. Like what? And it's another video I want to do that I haven't figured out how to do. I've talked about it before. Too much information is not a good thing. And you need discernment. Discernment is going to be my next big topic, I think, in general. But you need to be able to find a way to engage with just the relevant information, right? And cut off the information flow after that, because all they're doing is what would commonly be called in computers a buffer overflow, right? Attack. And so they're just shoving too much stuff at you so that your brain forgets the relevant and important parts. Your relevance realization is being overridden by the excess information. It's actually what's happening. And then when that happens, you forget the important part, right? Except I have a really good memory and I tend not to forget. And also when important part comes up, I actually shut off. I stop listening to people. But yeah, I don't care. I mean, I'll let them keep talking and not tell them this, but I'm actually not listening to them anymore. I found the relevant part and I'm done. And is that flawless? No, but you know what? It's close enough. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not an idealist. I'm a pragmatist and a realist. So I don't care. Once I think I have the relevant information, that's what I act on. And yeah, I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm going to make mistakes anyways. I'm too worried about it. It's important though. It's important that you don't get overwhelmed, that you stop people stop yourself from listening when you found the relevant information. And you're going to get it wrong a few times, and you're going to get it wrong when you're practicing finding relevant information. So you're going to make all kinds of mistakes. You know what? Welcome to the real world. Everybody keeps thinking like, well, the real world is the place of perfection where nobody ever makes mistakes and everything everybody does is intentional and everybody is rational. And when they're not being rational, they're not in the real world. That's you go off and you larp. Then you come into the no, you have to learn how to be in the real world by being in the real world and making real world mistakes, that doing irrational things and all the rest of it, and making errors in judgment and suffering consequences. You need all that. You need all that. That's really important. There's no substitute for it in a video game or a board game or paintball. Not that you can't exact some of those skills, not that you shouldn't engage with those things. No one's attacking those things. I'm just saying that the solution isn't the real world, is the world of the perfect. No, we need to go back to Plato. The world of the perfect is the world of Platonic forms. You don't live there. Welcome to hell. You live here. You live in the land of struggle and learning and screwing up and making amends and getting redemption, as long as there's not too much tolerance, because tolerance is bad in too great amounts, because it doesn't allow for grace, doesn't allow for redemption, right? It doesn't allow for people to learn, right? That they're not bumping up against things and making mistakes, right? And without people leading the way, without people metering out the chastisement, the shame, the critique, we're not going to get anywhere. And that's a leadership role that we all need to try to take some responsibility for. If somebody transgresses and you don't tell them, their inability to, or the fact that they transgress again and again and again, is now partially your fault. No, really, it actually is. You are obligated to tell people when they screw up. You are obligated to do that. Otherwise, you are making the world a worse place by being lazy. Not a fan of either. Just saying. But you need to know that. It's important to give people feedback. And negative feedback is more salient to us, more important to us, evolutionarily speaking, for real, than positive feedback. B.F. Skinner, a great psychology guy, a lot of great breakthroughs from B.F. Skinner. He tried to disprove this. He tried to prove the positive feedback hypothesis, where positive feedback is all that was required, and as long as you had that, you were fine, and everything would be well and good. And he failed. And his son tried that experiment, and he failed. And the reason why these people fail is because it doesn't work. It's not a magic trick. Like, oh, the reason why this hasn't been done or has been tried and failed is because it doesn't work. It's not to say everything ever, but like, believe the data at some point. A scientist did a scientific experiment that failed to prove his thesis. Maybe that's because it was wrong. Like, duh. It's not hard. Everybody misuses science. Science is good at disproving things, and it's terrible at proving things. It's not designed to prove things. That's not what its purpose is. The telos of science is not to find truth. That's not what it is. And someday I'm going to find out where all my definitions of science came from, because A, they match a bunch of people in the past, but B, they're technically correct and sort of irrefutable in some sense. At least mathematically, using math and Aristotelian logic. But they seem to have lost the world. Like, it was explicit in the schools I went to. Science isn't about truth. It wasn't supposed to be. Like, scientific certainty is not 100%, and it's not supposed to be. And we don't know this anymore. We're running around as if science is truth. And maybe that's because we've lost religious truth, right? We've lost the real sort of interaction with truth, which is in religion. That's where the science is grounded. I mean, this is very much the case that Jordan Peterson tried to make to John Vervaeke with Jonathan Pageau when they did that in that video in the house up in the lodge there, the lodge area on the top floor of his house, which looks like a lovely room. Really cool. It must have been a great recording to do up there in Toronto. I've never been to Toronto. I've been to Ottawa and I've been to Montreal. And I've been to Antigonish and Merigonish. And I passed a lot of cool places on the way that I now wish I had gone to, like the Bay of Fundy. But I've not been to Toronto. So one of these days, I've been to Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay was awesome. Catherine did a great job. Scott did a great job, and his wife did a wonderful job. Like, unbelievable. Magic confirmed. Like, actual magic, definitely. Spirits were raised. Take that however you want. That idea, and I've been toying with the idea of, John talks about the nomological order, which honestly I think doesn't exist. Different problem. We'll just slide right past that. And the normative order and the narrative order. The three ends. Kind of cute. I'm not sold. Not sold. No, nomological order does not exist. However, that I think I can prove that. I'd love for somebody to try to prove nomological order to me. That would be awesome. It'd be really fun because I could be wrong. This is new thoughts. Um, and there's reasons why I think it doesn't exist, by the way. But you know, we don't have to get into that. One of the things I was thinking about is if you're a postmodern, and I have a video on my channel about postmodernism. So I'll try to post that link here. Um, if you're a postmodern and you don't believe in narrative, or you don't want to believe in narrative, or like whatever, right? You're sort of like, oh, narrative bad. Yeah, okay, maybe, right? Like, yeah, maybe narrative bad. Then you're not going to buy into narrative order, right? Like, I mean, that's what you're rejecting. You're rejecting narrative order as such. Oh, I see YouTube fixed my channel. Thank you, YouTube. And that's okay. And then maybe science is struggling for the nomological order, right? And okay, that's reasonable. Like that's what it claims to do in some sense. So go science, try to find your nomological order. Even though I think Peterson honestly put that to bed. Although he would have done a better job had he just engaged with my video on story, narrative, and archetype. But we'll forgive him because he doesn't watch the best YouTube channel ever. I think that you're going to fall into normative order. And this idea of normative order is sort of wrapped up in, if you can get enough people to believe and act as if, then that's enough. And I don't think that's enough. I mean, that can last a long time, but and it can do amazing things, and some of them can be towards the good for sure. I think that's what all the great religions would say. But I don't think that's sufficient. I don't think it's correct. But in many ways, we're battling for normative order. People are battling for Twitter and what gets said on Twitter. That's a battle for normative order. And if you've rejected narrative order, and nomological order belongs to science, then your next battleground is normative order. So I've been playing with this idea. And I'm like, oh, I really kind of like this outline. This is kind of fascinating framing. It's not my favorite framing. It's not my preferred framing by any means. It's not even a framing I'm sure has a good amount of utility. I don't know yet, but I'm playing with it. The three ends of order. And what that means, like how, again, this gets into framing. Like, how do you is that a useful frame? I don't know. Can you do stuff? Because if you can't do stuff, it's not a useful frame. And I got to do that. Like, how do you find pragmatic frames? Like, game A, game B. Yeah, I reject it. Why? Because when I ask game B people how to participate, they don't know. Like, okay, well, then it's not pragmatic. So even if you're right, I can't participate. So, like, I got things to do. And if you don't have things to do, I can't do them with you. And that's fine too. Like, not mad. But no, I'm not, like, you lost me. You lost me at not giving me something to do. So this idea of normative order is fascinating to me because I think this three ends framing might help people to understand. And maybe if you wanted to sort of imagine, and I do think it's an imagine to some extent. Sorry, guys, I'm going to piss a bunch of people off now. Imagine that there is a culture war, and then that war is not about different cultures, but just is a fight over culture as such, or like no culture at all. And I outline that in in this particular video here, which I'm gonna paste into the chatty chat, then you could imagine that the culture war had three fronts. The narrative front, who controls the story, the normative front, who controls the science, and the nomological front, who controls the science, and the normative front, who controls the information that the people get. And look, it's sloppy because there's a lot of like, the media is using narrative to hijack. Sure, the science is using narrative to hijack the nomological. Sure, right. That's definitely a problem. Like, I agree, there's an issue there. But it's an interesting frame to think about the culture war in three factions. I still prefer to think of it, as I pointed out in my video, that it's a war for a culture or no culture. It's not really a battle between different cultures. Like, BLM is not a culture. It's not going to be a culture. It's not going to have been a culture. It's not a thing. Right? It's just a cult, right? Not a culture, but a cult that is trying to establish a normative order by giving you a narrative that is false and observably false, right? In all possible ways. So they're hijacking the narrative order of an event, like say George Floyd, right? And they're using that to pretend as though a normalization exists. Well, there's systemic racism, it's always existed. See, like there's a period in history that happened, right? And again, how do we know bad frames and stuff like that? Like, how do we know they're lying? Like, well, for one thing, slavery wasn't in all of the US. Shock. That's why we fought the Civil War. I know. And it wasn't in most of the US, at least not by population control. That's where the 3/5 compromise comes from, which is horrible. It was horrible. There's no question about it. But what else were they to do? It was not an easy problem to solve because nobody lived down south. Everybody lived up north where there were no slaves. And where slaves, when they got there, were freed for the most part until a certain Massachusetts court decision. Man, Massachusetts, I tell you. I like Massachusetts when I grew up there, and man, did they ruin that place. It's too bad. It's too bad. It was a fun place. It was full of goodness. This way of hijacking the narrative to enforce the nomological, right, the science, or the normative. What everyone's doing. Everybody is apologizing every time they say something that somebody says is wrong, or everyone is apologizing for racism or their own race or whatever, right? It really kind of disintegrated the language sort of on purpose, knowingly, with forethought and malice. Yes, they're bad people. That's what I'm saying. They are. Not all of them. There's plenty of useful idiots. Most people are useful idiots. Fair enough. Everyone's a useful idiot about something. Because you kind of have to be. Distributed cognition is required. Don't think for yourself. My friend Jacob has a great video on that. He's right. I'll have to get him better presentation skills, but he's doing pretty good. He's doing pretty good. I was impressed. Better slides. Slides are hard though. My slides suck too. This idea of appealing to nomological order, right? Appealing to scientific authority, appealing to narrative order, right? Oh no, this is the story of our history, or the story that our forefathers told, or the story of the Western canon, or whatever, right? And then appealing to normative order. Well, it's always been this way, or we've done things this way for a long time, right? It's not a bad frame. It's an interesting way to frame things, these three ends of order. So, yeah. And should probably explain, nomological is just naming, really. But again, I'm not sure that naming is a thing by itself. I think naming is embedded in narrative, but I'm waiting to find somebody smart enough to and willing enough to defend this nomological order idea. And maybe if I get brave enough, I'll ask John to do it, because he probably would. He's a great guy. That'd be fun, actually, just to discuss the whole idea, the whole set of concepts. This and this is just, yet another frame. How do we view the culture war? We can use the three ends of order. Um, we could use Mark's silly frame, although again, I don't think it's silly, of order versus chaos, roughly speaking. I mean, I'm really just kind of ripping off Peterson at some point, right? Like, there's the people who want chaos because they think something better is going to emerge than what we have today, and the people who are for order, and maybe the people that are for order are just one group, and everybody else who's trying to impose a different order or tear down the system is just part of the chaos. Because I think that's a better and easier and less stressful way to think about it. It's just a nice, clean, clear model. And yeah, I had a funny thing happen. I think it was last night. Maybe it was 2 nights ago on Discord. A kid got on and he was telling me the story about these people entered into a contract. One person said, well, I want to write a contract to kill you and eat you. And the other person agreed. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, and this actually happened, apparently. I was like, man, sometimes I'm glad I don't know things. Like, ignorance really is bliss when it is folly to be wise. In this case, it is folly to be wise. Who the hell wants to know about this? I apologize for subjecting you to it. However, it is live and we are navigating. Sometimes we navigate it into the rocks. I have done that. This happens. I apologize. He asked somebody if they thought that was okay. And because they're an idiot materialist, they said, yes, it's okay because there was a contract and consent. And therefore, and I was like, consent is not ethics, dude. Like, definitely not. And really, all the guy wanted was that answer. Like, he just wanted the answer that, no, this is not okay, period, end of statement. He didn't want a massive philosophical justification, through Aristotle, touching on, maybe some Heideggerian or Nietzschean philosophy, up to the present day, proving why with modern political framing. He didn't want all that. He really just wanted somebody to say, no, absolutely not, and here's why. And part of my explanation was ethics doesn't involve only two people. Like, ethics involves bunches of people. And a lot of the solipsism is a problem because people don't understand, roughly speaking, that engagement is difficult. Without a good definition of ethics and morality that includes large groups of other people, you're not talking about ethics and morality. You're just solving the problem for one individual, and you're ignoring scale. And we ignore scale. We totally ignore scale. And almost all of these problems that we're talking about, which I would argue, to use some Verbachian fancy language, are perennial problems, are around scale. That's what they're around. They're about scale, the lack of scale, the problems of scale. You can solve a problem for yourself, and that problem may not work for any other human on the planet. No, really. Well, then did you solve a problem? Of course you did. You solved a problem for yourself. That's fantastic. Congratulations. I'm very happy for you. Did you try to abstract that problem out and solve it at scale? Probably made a mistake there, buddy. Just saying. Problems that exist at scale that also exist at your scale, at your fractal, self-similar level of reality, those solutions are different. And I do have a video on my channel about the we answer. Yeah, is it the we answer to an I question? No, it's an I answer to a we question. That's what it is. That was a long time ago. Where somebody asks them, like, what do you do to sense make in the world? And somebody answers with, or no, what can we do to sense make in the world? And somebody answers with, well, what I do is, and it's like, oh, that's great, dude. But what if other people can't do that? This is an helpful answer. And it's an understandable mistake because people get confused. Somebody's asking you a question, you want to answer it, they want to hear an answer. No one notices that the answer is not answering the question that was asked, but a similar enough question, right? That may be helpful to some people. Like, look, a lot of the things that we do, other people can do and find the same benefit from, for sure. It's just not all things. and not everybody, and maybe not enough people. And I don't want this to go too long because I do like Skylar. So yay, I am game for a nomological throwdown. Yeah, me too. Uh, and we got to have one at some point. Of course, you can hop into this live stream and we can have one right now because we're navigating live patterns. Whatever patterns come up in the chat, in the stream, if you want to join, or whatever comes out of my head, which that's dangerous. But hey, here we are. That's why we've got the pirate stuff going, because danger, danger. Also, hijacking thought. I'm sure Grim would be happy. I'm trying to use my voodoo hijack magic on people. There is a manipulation in listening. In listening, but don't listen to people. They're manipulating you. I don't think manipulation is the universal bad, so I don't have a problem with it. But manipulating people into the good is still good. Yay! Good, good. Goodness is good. Yeah, and it's sort of some of those things we don't realize. I've been twittering a lot lately, actually, and not just flowers because it's winter, and I do have a couple flowers actually on the. I don't forget what kind of bush that is. I used to know. It's gone from my brain for the moment. It'll come back, maybe, maybe not. That's blooming. Everything else seems to be dead. There might be a flower or two out somewhere in this crazy yard of mine. I got 12 acres, so I have no idea what's out there. So I've been tweeting things and lots of responses to people too, but some insights I've been having. And I'm hoping to put all this stuff together. I'm trying to get the Mark of Wisdom website up and rolling. I actually fixed all the technical problems. Now I have learned a bunch of technical stuff that I did not know. Or rather, learned how to use the knowledge I always had to fix the problems that didn't need to happen because people are dumb and don't know how to computer anymore, apparently. But I have found all of this out and figured out where it all came from. And now the test website is up and very slow. I mean, very fast, but doesn't have any content yet. So markofwisdom.org is coming soon. And it will have all kinds of stuff on it because for 2.5 years, a little bit more, Manuel and I have been working on a ton of stuff. And not just around navigating patterns, we'll say, but also, right, we've got practices, we've got all sorts of interesting things. I've got to revamp my personal website on the other server and give that a better domain. Maybe I'll do that too. I don't know. All this stuff costs money, which I'm slowly running out of. Okay, not slowly running out of. Lawsuits are expensive, not recommended. And not working is expensive, also not recommended. Engaging with this stuff is interesting because there is a way in which we don't have a good definition of wisdom, right? We have lots of partial definitions of wisdom out there, and some of those need to be consolidated. One of the things that occurred to me is sort of I still love one of John's projects is, we don't need to make everybody wiser necessarily, but we do need more wise people. Yes, wise persons. That is true. I take that very seriously. I think cultural cognitive grammar is part of that. That's why I'm navigating patterns. That's what it is. It's fixing cultural cognitive grammar. That's not all it is, but that's actually not 80% of the project. Mark of Wisdom is going to be about practices, right? It's going to be about communities, wisdom communities, and how to build them. As soon as I get through the stupid leadership and authority video, and I've done a lot of work. Manuel and I have done a lot of work on this, especially on Clubhouse. And I got to get the Clubhouse audio up. If anybody wants to help with any of this, my BitChute is way behind on navigating patterns videos. There's a ton of stuff I'm neglecting. Some of which with reason, and some of which just through sheer neglect. Because I'm good at neglect, actually. If you need hints or tips on how to be neglectful, just hit me up. I'll tell you. Getting stuff done can be hard, especially when you're all your motivation is self-motivation and everybody's a freaking naysayer because they don't want success around them because it's a judge. I think that all of the projects around patterns and navigation of patterns and wisdom and building community all related in that they're enchantments or re-enchantments of the world for people, right? They're getting people to re-expand, re-inflate the world so that they can engage with it more intelligently instead of just being angry and resentful and going, hey, you're doing something. I hate you. I'm going to tear your thing down now. Like, until we stop tearing things down, we're not going to stop tearing things down, and tearing things down is bad. So yeah, that's still part of the mission. Like, get people to stop tearing everything down, start building stuff up. I know it's hard, and then you have to do things, and doing is hard, but it's way better. It's way, way better. I promise. And oh, we need the motivation of money not to start doing things. And the number of people that I talk to that say, "Oh, Mark, I'm a good programmer," and I'm like, "Okay, maybe. I don't know. Could be the best programmer ever. I have no idea." But I have this app idea, and I really need to get funding. I'm like, "Are you a lunatic? It's software. Freaking write it." If you have software written, then you can get an investor really easily. Actually, although you don't need one in today's day and age, because you can just post working software on sites and get paid immediately, like Gumroad and stuff. There's all kinds of tools for that now that didn't exist, even 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago for sure, right? Like, you don't need to get, like, I need a software publishing house to fund my development. No, just write the code. Like, really, like, honestly, professional level development tools have been free for years. It was a big thing we used to complain about, in the old days with home computers in particular. I mean, you can read about the old APIC computers, and compilers cost $300 back in the day, and crazy stuff. And some of them weren't even good. So it's kind of a big deal. You have to. I got to apologize because I can't really read very well because I'm too far back from my computer. And here we go. I'm looking forward to your video about procrastination one day. Okay, Skylar, thank you. Yes, I will definitely be getting around to my video on procrastination. However, the video whose absence speaks for itself. There you go. There's lots of things that speak through absence. Procrastination is certainly one of them. That was very good. I appreciate being amused during my live navigations here. I'm surprised no one wants to jump in and navigate with me, but that's okay. I will man the pirate ship alone if necessary for as long as I am able. And I don't know how long that's going to be, but it certainly helps to have people along for the sojourning, and maybe we'll find a ship or two to attack in our pirate fashion. And I think another thing I've been really thinking about that's interesting is Van de Clay did an excellent video a couple days ago. It was so excellent. I didn't put a comment on it. I wrote him an email, which he responded to. I actually just wanted him to tell me that he got it, but he felt that, so he responded, which is very funny because it's me, really not necessary. But I do appreciate it. It's really cute, and really nice of him to respond. And look, it was a long email, and it was like, I think you do your best work when you're doing this, that, and the other thing, right? But yeah, I mean, he was talking about. He was talking with Dan Shervin. That was such a great conversation. The second half, that conversation just kind of blew me away. And I was just like, damn, we need more of this Paul. Like the Paul here, this Paul identity, that's what we need. And we should recognize better. And this came up in the live stream earlier. Was that today? I think it was today. With Chad, like, we should understand better that we have different identities when we're playing out different roles, and that's okay. And those identities conflict, and that's okay. See my video on the intimacy crisis. I have two. One on Andrea with the Bangs channel, which is excellent because Andrea with the Bangs is excellent, and one on my channel with Catherine, which is double excellent because Catherine is double excellent. And if you doubt me, you should just watch any of her videos anywhere. I don't know that I've seen them all, but I've seen a bunch. And she's always awesome, much like Andrea with the Bangs. Also, all of her videos are awesome. So yeah, engage with awesome videos on the intimacy crisis. I'm going to put links in because that's part of what this is all about. Oh, I'm glad Charlie likes my getup. That's important, Charlie. I'm very happy that you like this. I was going to do this last week, and last week was just my first attempt, and man, everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. And now I'm doing better, but yeah, we gotta fix this camera. The camera's literally in front of my laptop, so I can't really see that well. But I don't need to be able to see that well. But yeah, I gotta fix this camera zoom problem because it's driving me nuts. And I probably actually just have to get a better camera with different features or something. But that's for another day. No income, no toys. That's sort of the rule when you're poor. And I've been poor many times. I'm very good at being poor. Um, yeah, I got a tripod. I grabbed a tripod from the other room, and now it's sitting on the tripod. It's half on the laptop. It's crazy. I got to work out this new desk situation. Still needs some work for sure. I got a standing desk. It's beautiful. I love it. Office is really clean right now. Too clean. Too much echo in the room. Got to fix the sound. Didn't even bother with my lights today, although I don't think I need them. Like, I think the lighting is really good. That's why I didn't turn them on. I was like, I don't want to mess with the lighting. I'd rather mess with the camera. But yeah, eventually I got to get around to the lighting fix. Yeah, well, Charlie, when you're navigating pirate patterns live, just you need to get up. Like, people need to know what you're doing. It's really important. So the live pattern navigation is kind of, to some extent, honestly, all wrapped up in the idea of the fact that you cannot get around having multiple identities. Like, you as a person have multiple identities. You're carrying out multiple roles. And those roles conflict because there's conflict in the world. And it's the intimacy crisis, in my opinion, that attempts to resolve all that. Right? That's basically where it's going. That's the attempt to resolve these issues, like conflict in our relationships. How do we deal with it? What do we do? How do we handle having conflicts? It's not clear to me that we know, and those are some of the skills that we've lost. And Charlie can't stick around. What the hell, Charlie? I run these for you and real friends. Like, I don't see. This is one of those things. Is that a good frame? Reality? I don't know. Maybe there's no real anything. Maybe we're all just LARPing, like Grim Griff says. I don't know. If it's all LARPing, there's no real friends. Problem solved. You don't have real friends. Good for you. Get out. Meet people. Enjoy. Go to this thing they call the real world. I've heard this place called the outside. It's real. Yeah, I mean, we're uncomfortable with conflict and we just don't know how to resolve it. We keep avoiding it. It's like, no, there's conflict in the world and we have to deal with it. We have to find a way to deal with it. We have to find a way to interface with it, to bump up against it, to not resolve it necessarily, because not all conflicts are resolvable, but to accept the conflict. If you go out with somebody and go to dinner and they can't eat gluten, do you eat rolls in front of them or not? I don't know. Like, maybe. And if they give you permission, do you believe them? That's a bigger problem. In my opinion, that's a much bigger problem. I don't know. Maybe you don't believe them. Maybe they say, oh, no, it's fine. And you're like, no, it's not. I'm not doing that. Out of respect for, you being at dinner with me, right? That could happen. These are hard. These are hard questions. And it's not one or two in one or two domains, right? There are questions all over the place, and they scale. These, yeah, I see the bread. Charlie, someday we'll go out together. We'll have a blast. And if we do that, then I will have the bread. Don't worry. Teo, why is Teo up this late? Is this actually Teo? It could be. Hello, sir.
Yes, yes, it is.
Good to see you. Welcome.
You too, bro. I took a nap after work and now I'm up till God knows when. So I'll jump in, keep you company.
Oh well, thank you. I like that. Do you have any questions? Any thoughts on all the rambling I've been doing? Or
I jumped a little bit later, but you did mention one thing that I've been trying to figure out, and I thought I'll jump in to ask you directly. You said the culture war is a fight for a culture or no culture. Did I understand that
yes,
correctly? Can you just
yes,
expand on that a little bit?
sure. So I do have a video on it. I think I put that one in the chat too. On navigating patterns, of course, the best YouTube channel about cultural cognitive grammar ever created, and confirmed. Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people are viewing the culture war as a fight of different cultures, like fighting together, right? That's their frame, and I don't think that's helpful. I think the best frame to think of this in is the people who understand culture and want to preserve it versus the people who would rather have something else, because I don't think it's optional. Like in some way, the culture that you have is so linked to the past and to what came before you that you can't just arbitrarily remove it and replace it with something else, right? So you can't just come in and say, you know what, the science says that masks work, after years of saying the masks don't work, because that happened. Like there are papers, I can show them to you. I read some of them. No, really, I did, because I'm crazy and I do that. And Matt Ridley, so funny, I saw Matt Ridley talk to Greg Ellis, Monkey Toe Studio, great YouTube channel. Greg Ellis, the respondent, he had a chat with Matt Ridley a while back. And Matt Ridley, at the very end of the chat, which is an excellent chat because Matt Ridley's awesome, said nobody before COVID hit thought that masks worked. Nobody. And that's correct, right? And so why would you go through the trouble of trying to explain to people now that masks work? Well, because you're fighting against the past culture that had established scientifically, we'll call it, that masks didn't work, right? You're not trying to change the narrative at that point. I mean, you are, but it's not going to work because it's not anchored in history. So when you try to change the narrative in that way by denying what came before, you're really just tearing any possibility of culture away, because you're hitting at the ground of culture itself. And culture isn't about just the future. It's also about that historical grounding, that land, that place that you're standing, that allows you to build things on top of it. Does that make sense, Teo, or did I lose you?
Um, you had me, you lost me, you got me back, lost me again. It was a roller coaster.
That's okay.
But I think maybe not the mask analogy, you lost me a little bit, but trying to understand what you're trying to say. I think using the culture war and gender could be um
Okay.
like that's I could understand your frame better using that example of culture war. And I can see how the you've got one side trying to hold the scientifically established two gender norm, and then you've got the other that's just I can see how the ever expanding pronouns list of pronouns is an example of just attempt to tear down the gender norm. So I can say in that sense, but in the example of the mask, that seems more like a like just changing narrative, because I know you've read the papers that establish that masks don't work, but the vast majority of the public are not familiar with that information.
Right.
That's not
Oh,
something
no,
that's
no, no.
salient to them, and
Yeah,
it's
no,
just
no, that's
I see
fair.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same issue with gender, right? Because you're taking the established role of gender. I know Brett Weinstein's talked about this. Dozens of people have talked about this. Dozens of really credible scientists have talked about this, right? The fact of the matter is, we've been using two genders literally forever, like actually ever, like as far as we can tell since we've been conscious. Right? and genders everywhere in biology, right? With very few exceptions. There are exceptions, but they're very few, right? And so the normative way of understanding gender, right, or the average way, is with two. And you're denying all of the previous science that was done to insist on something that can't hold. It's anti-order, because to your point, once you crack open two genders, there's no way to draw a line anymore. The borders are gone. And so now you can't have any genders because you need an infinite number of them, because it just keeps expanding, and that's not helpful. So yeah, so that destroys culture, because not only are you destroying the past and rewriting science, but you're also putting us in a situation where we can't have a frame to understand that whole thing.
Yeah, but even in that, I still don't see how it's culture versus no culture. Can you just...
Sure. So again, culture is the ground upon which you build things, and so it requires.
Hold on. Let me take culture as the ground upon which you build things. Okay. Yeah, I think I understand that. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So the way you know how to build a house is all tied up with historical attempts to build different types of houses in different regions, right? And that's why culture is tied up with geography. Like where you are as a species, as a peoples, whatever size peoples that is, tribal, non-tribal, doesn't none of that stuff matters to some extent. Not with this argument, it doesn't matter.
In a modernized, globalized world, what role does geography play in culture?
Well, because your buildings, your buildings are affected. So here, I'll give you a clear example from, I mean, I can't give you an example that's relevant to you because I didn't get to spend enough time in England yet. I went to Scotland. It's beautiful, but I didn't spend enough time there either.
Never.
If you look at a city like Boston, Boston has a lot of varied architecture. Why? Because there's a lot of money there, right? The wealthiest man in the colonies before we were a country was there, right? And all the commerce was there. The Boston Brahmin are real, right? Or were real. That was the center of that culture. Now you take a similar city where I'm living now. I don't live in that city, but it's 2 hours away. Charleston, South Carolina. Charleston, South Carolina and Boston are almost the same city, except for the geography. They're both on the ocean. They're both really old, back colonial days. Like there's not a lot of stuff that's colonial days in the United States, because the United States was freaking huge and most of it was populated well after we became a country, right? There were only 13 original colonies, right? So you go down there and it's like Boston has a varied architecture, but the variation in architecture is informed by the Caribbean. So there's these small houses that are set up a certain way. There's a whole house called the Charleston, which is long and skinny. And it's weird. Like the garages are in the back. I'm like, what? Like you'd never see that up north in New England. Like garages are in the back, garages in the front. Duh. Like there's a garage in the back. Like and there's a place down the street from me in Columbia, South Carolina, which is in the middle of the state. Again, it's 2 hours from Charleston. They've got different styles of houses, all in this one development. And one style is Charleston houses. The only difference there is they're longer and skinny. They're beautiful. They're pretty big, actually. I mean, by your standards, they're enormous mansions. By the standards of the rest of the people around them, they're small houses. But they're lovely. They're perfectly lovely. They're way overpriced, of course, because it's a huge development. That development's like 2,000 houses or something insane. They have a special driveway in the back to get to the garages, because the garages are in the back of the house. There's no reason for that. Like that's not required. It might be required in Charleston, or it might have been back in the day for geographical reasons, right? But it's not required now, right? But that bleeds in. Well, then how does that affect your food, right? Because the food that they eat. So in South Carolina, there's the uplands, the midlands, where I live, and the lowlands, where Charleston is, for example. They eat totally different food. Why? Because they're on the water and I'm not. That's one factor, right? The lowlands are considered the poor section of South Carolina. There's a lot of snobbery around that. Let's not go there, right? And then the the people that lived there just had access to different foods, and the good foods would get sold, and they'd get the crappy foods, right? Which are now all the rage, by the way. If you go to Charleston, you can eat snail and all kinds of poor people food that would normally taste gross, but they learned to make it taste good, right? So geography affects all these things. It affects how you build your houses. It affects it affects what things you pay attention to. It affects how you eat. It affects when you eat, what fasting means. Like all of these things are affected by geography, because availability matters, and it matters less now, but it doesn't not matter, right? Like, down here, I won't eat lobster. Why? Because I'm from freaking Boston, and you guys don't have lobster in the South. I'm sorry. Like, they don't even have lobsters. These little things, and they think they're lobsters. I'm like, that's not freaking lobster. Lobster's up in Maine. Let me show you a lobster, buddy. In the cold water where the rocks are, that's where the big, yummy lobsters grow. I'm not a particular fan of lobster, but all these things affect everything.
I don't know much about architecture, but I can go off it, and I'll give you England's a very unique example of this culture war of established culture of geography of the people from the land and the quote unquote invaders, the people that immigrants, and it's become a mesh pot of just really cool but also like really weird culture. London, for example, is very cosmopolitan. It's just everyone from everywhere, but at the core of it, you've got a very thriving, like a unique Black culture, which is a unique mixture of Caribbean and African immigrants, and the way that culture is developed. Like I moved there in 2007, and I've seen the way that culture is developed, because when I first moved there, it was a brotherly rivalry between the the Caribbeans and the Africans, and the Caribbeans had like the established culture, like most of the slang were Caribbean slang, but over time, I've seen how the African, especially Nigerian slang, has been incorporated into British slang, and you've just got this really unique development of cultures. But that's also in a already established, like the East End culture is a very Cockney culture, and you've got this both these things like exist in London. And like when describing the London culture, I still don't see how the frame of culture versus no culture is right. I think it's still different cultures trying to work together to create new culture, and I think that's the culture war. It's like the friction of trying to see how other cultures fit together. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, look, there's a case to be made for cultural integration, but that case for me is a time case. How many people are you bringing in over time, right? And so, and I mean, look, I can't speak to England and Europe in general. There are some things I know from talking to way too many people that don't live in the United States for sure, but in the United States, almost all the people that came here up until very, very recently wanted what we had and were willing to learn the language. We're very proud of learning the language. We're very proud of getting citizenship because they agreed with our values. They did not come here to get what we have. They came here to do what we do in the way that we do it. In other words, they came to this country for the purpose of becoming American. They did not come to this country for the purpose
I disagree with that.
I
disagree with that. I've as an immigrant, and the son of an immigrant, and also I've got like family who are immigrants in America, and like I can't speak for all immigrants. I can speak for most Nigerian immigrants. The mindset isn't let's go to America to become American, to become American. It's a lot more pragmatic than that. It's our the the opportunities back home are so limited. Where can I? What looks like the place that affords the most opportunity? And it's the free countries. It's like the Western countries. It's America. It's
Right.
England. It's Sweden, and like it's just let me get out of where I'm at to find myself in a better place. And the culture aspect, culturally, uh, especially first gen like and second generation immigrants still identify way more with their with where they came from
Sure.
than America. And culturally it's always like I can speak to because I've gone through the experience. It's always trying to adjust where can I find commonality in culture, and where you find commonality, like you kind of exaggerate that a little bit, and then like where there are no commonality, like you kind of keep that private, and like just trying to just how much of it's not when they come to America to become American. It's like it's more when they get to America, then they discover America, and then you get to pick and choose which one you assimilate with.
So here's one of the differences that's actually in the data. So if you look at why people choose, people who can get out, right? People who are poor who can get out, why they choose to go to America instead of Europe, there's actually a real reason. Like there's a real difference between these two sets of people. And that difference is the people that are really willing to work really hard because they think that, who are used to working hard or want to see the fruits of working hard, they all want to go to America because they recognize that in Europe, your options are limited. You'll get to the average pretty okay in most countries, right? Unless you're Muslim in France, then you're screwed, right? But on average, you'll do pretty well, right? You'll do pretty well because those European countries will bring you up. But what you won't do is get wealthy. Like that's extremely unusual because, contrary to what everybody seems to believe, because nobody ever looks at numbers, apparently, they just want to believe their own magical numbers. The income mobility in the US is way higher than anywhere else. Way higher, right?
What's income mobility?
So income mobility is the ability to move from having nothing to being a millionaire. Like,
yes, got it.
There are more people in the 1% of the United States that weren't in the 1% a year ago, or when they were 10 years before they got in the 1% than anywhere else in the world, right?
Yeah,
in other words, our 1% it consists of people who earned it while they were here from being poor, and that doesn't happen anywhere near as often.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Like in my experience also, I can agree with that because I think what you're saying is the most opportunistic people, if given the choice, will choose to go to America, and that completely
right. But that's wrapped up in values, and that doesn't preclude the integration as long as you do it slowly enough. It doesn't preclude the integration because look. In Boston, so where I grew up, actually I grew up in Lowell. So the thing about Lowell is that Lowell is the most integrated and cosmopolitan city in the United States for a very long time. And that is because it was where the Industrial Revolution came from. And when the mill girls got screwed over by the mills, by the second generation mill owners who bought the mills from the people who came up with the mills, basically, when they took over, they screwed over the mill girls and they started bringing in immigrants. Right. I think at first it was the Irish, although it might not be. So what happened in Lowell is you've got an Irish neighborhood, you've got a Greek neighborhood, you've got a Polish neighborhood, and then you had Laotians and Cambodians come in after Vietnam. Like, it is ridiculous. At one point, in fact, it might be more immigrants now than white people in Lowell, Massachusetts. It might have been that way for a while. I haven't tracked the numbers because I moved out a long time ago, but. Certainly, it's very mixed, but all the ethnic neighborhoods are intact. And it's not a cultural issue because the individual cultures don't matter as much as the culture of virtues and values that people are going after. So Puritans in particular, then this works way better in the Northeast than it does in the South. Puritans in particular don't care about anything except your freaking work ethic and the fact that you believe in God. It doesn't. They don't care how you believe in God. They don't want to talk about religion, and they never do. It's impolite in New England to discuss, to bring up religion. Not that it doesn't get discussed, but you're not supposed to ask somebody. Down south, you're supposed to ask them what church they go to, so you know something about them, which is a problem for me because I don't go to a church, so it doesn't work. But it's very different, just north to south. And then there's more than that. Colin Woodard has a great book called American Nations. Everybody should read it. You'll understand things about America. They're just amazing. But it's the integration still happens, right? And being able to have shared virtues and values, to the point here that Anselman's making, right? Being able to have shared virtues and values is the thing that facilitates the integration. Integration of different cultures isn't a problem. And then it's not a war, it's an integration. The thing that's a war is when you're denying where the culture came from and trying to replace it wholesale with something else. That causes the war.
Okay, I think I'm understanding you better. So the comparing America and the UK is helpful in this because America is a lot more it's a lot more welcoming and accommodating for like a lot of many different cultures, subcultures, so to speak, because the underlying culture is set up in a way that affords that. It's like you said, if you're working hard, if you've got this set of values, the culture affords the opportunity to move up, and as long as that happens, all the cultures there will feel comfortable. Okay, I can get ahead. Whereas the complaints from the people that are classic xenophobe in the UK is their complaint is like, where is this culture? Because it's instead of integration, it's been a replacement job, is in their opinion, and you can see that it's not. Yeah, but I still don't say that's culture versus no culture, unless you're saying, okay, or you're saying culture. When you say culture, you're saying the culture that affords other culture to be able to thrive in the.
Well, no, I mean, look, and look, most of Europe, with the exception of the UK, actually is a monoculture. Like the French are explicitly monoculture. Like, you have to speak our language our way, or else you're not French, and screw you, French Canada. Which I'm half French Canadian, so screw the French. That's what we say. That's why we left. We didn't want to be a monoculture, right? We wanted to actually go out in the woods and hunt beavers for some odd reason. In America, we have a lot more space, so it's a big difference. But also, we were born of, everyone in Europe hates you. Come here. Like, that was literally the founding of our country.
Your DNA, yeah.
Like, actually, like, nobody disputes this. Right? They got kicked out of England. They went to the Netherlands. The Netherlands said, we're progressive, because they were, right? And they were 10 years ahead of the US in a lot of things. And then we'll give you a boat and fund your expedition. And England felt that and had all the land and said, yeah, we'll sign a document. As long as you stay out of our country, you can have your own land over there and be subject still, because we like taxes. And that's what caused the whole dust up with the revolution ultimately, right? But having the shared religious virtues and values meant that the different Puritan groups, the Shakers and the Quakers and all the other crazy groups that came over, could get along, because they had this implicit agreement that the important thing was, your faith to God, or something roughly like that. This is an area of history I'm not well read on, because I just ignore all the religious stuff. I'm going to kick all the Christians off my damn channel somehow. This is how it's going to be. So it's different.
Good luck with that.
I know. It's different in England from the rest of continental Europe. And it's different in the United States entirely, because I made this argument with Adam on my channel on this French Revolution video that we did. Right, there's a progression of change from continental Europe to England, right, which became the UK, right, to the United States. There's this change in how the full underlying philosophy about how the world works actually rolled out, and it's a change. And I think the part of the change is this tolerance around, well, as long as we share enough religious virtues and values in common, we can integrate cultures just fine. It's not a problem. and that has proven to be true for the most part. What's Anselm on about? Folk from the Caribbean and parts of Africa are Christian, even Anglican. Yeah, well, they are, and they get along well here, right? And it's actually the people, so the immigrants from Africa who come to the United States do way better than the people who are already in the United States.
Yeah, I think just to speak to what Anselm is both of what he said, shared religion. I don't know if it's shared religion, because in the Paul van der Klee definition of religion, it's which religion. So the secular religion, I think, is more affording to than like but also I think Christianity plays a big part, because America, more than most country, as like the Christians have fought back a little bit, sometimes in very, very dumb way. Oh, Jacob, hi Jacob.
Hello.
Sometimes in very dumb ways, but the Christians are still fighting, they're still engaged in a culture war. In most of the rest of the West, they've just like retreated and are just, like either very accommodating or just not engaged in the culture at all. But American Christians are still engaged in the culture. But I think the secular religion, the religion of everyone's welcome, is that's what the UK has. It's a case of, it's very accommodating. It's like come as you are, and we'll ignore the fact that there are changes that are happening to like communities because of immigrants, but it's fine. If you bring it up, you're xenophobe or you're racist. That's just the game of how the culture war goes. But I think the shared religion, if the shared religion is secularity, yes, it works. But the problem with that is it's the secular game is a very public game, and then privately people still hold on to their smaller religion and they're still engaged in that, and that's still a factor, but it's just not allowed to be said publicly in the secular religion.
That's funny because I didn't know what you guys were talking about. I was just preparing I'm going to do Why Protestant Theology is So Bad, Part 4. And it's going to be, it's going to be, and because he's kind of lost his mind over this Christian nationalism stuff. Like, I was just watching the video he made on Christian nationalism, and it's the first time I've heard him stammer. I don't know. Do you guys listen to Doug Wilson at all?
No.
I've seen a few things, but I've not done a deep dive.
He's usually brilliant. I mean, I love his essays. He's a really funny and intelligent guy. And he put out this video. Well, it wasn't on his channel, but he put out this video that I was just laughing at yesterday. And then today he released another video where it's a react video. So it was a live react video, but he was just stammering. And it was a response to something on the Babylon Bee, which I hadn't seen. But
that's always a bad start. If you're making a video about something the Babylon Bee made.
Well, it was a Babylon Bee interview. But okay. No, the Babylon Bee actually puts out good stuff, I think. But,
yeah, I think brilliant stuff, but usually satirical and not to be taken too seriously.
Their interviews are pretty serious.
Yeah.
Their Elon Musk interview, I if you haven't watched it, definitely should.
I did check that out, yeah.
But so he seems not to understand that secularity is a Christian, well, I would say a Jewish invention, but certainly a Christian. So Father Eric is a secular priest. The idea of the secular is incredibly, if you didn't see his pyrotechnics, his No Quarter November video. It's actually hilarious. It was very well done. I generally like Doug Wilson, but with the Christian nationalism stuff, he seems to kind of have lost his mind. And I know that Paul a while back contributed a chapter to a book where he wrote an essay, and I haven't seen the essay. I don't know if it's been published, but about how secularity is a Christian innovation, and it is. Well, again, I would say it's a Jewish innovation, but it's a Jewish innovation that's been given to the world through Christianity. And
can you flush that out a little bit?
It is a Jewish innovation that's been given to the world through Christianity. And so it's just really weird to see Doug Wilson just engage so poorly. But again, I think it goes back to the ultimate problem with Protestant theology, which happens every time, which is no matter how smart you are, you're always relying on individual people as opposed to a large number of people over a large amount of time. And the video I was going to make fun of, right? He's talking about theonomy. I don't know if you've heard of this word theonomy, but it's another way of saying theocracy, the idea that you make laws based on what God wants. And like he's having this discussion with this other Christian about how you go about making Jewish law, he wants to say Christian law, but it's really like they were trying to reinvent the Talmud, and I was just sitting there cracking up.
Yeah, I don't find the secular religious frame compelling. I mean, I think that again, the problem is that people mix up the idea of religion with something, something optional, right? Because the post 1530 definition of religion, that's when the definition of religion changes entirely. And nobody before 1530 thought of religion the way we think of it today at all. Like it just wasn't in the ethos, right? And when you try to say something like, well, there's a secular religion, you destroy the ability to communicate ideas entirely. Religion is inevitable. And the real question is, do you understand the religion you have or not? Secularity is the denial of a religious frame. But I don't think that's possible.
Okay, the modern definition of secularity, which I think is the bad definition. So when we talk about the profane, right, we say something is profane, and this is, again, bad Protestant theology, is the idea that which is profane is something that should not exist. Mm-hmm. And that's not how Judaism viewed it from the beginning, and that's not how Christianity viewed it for a very long time. Right. And then you have Christians coming, and I didn't notice that this was the exact argument Korah gives until but it is the exact argument that Korah gives to Moses, and Chazi pointed it out, like, hey, we're all holy, everything's holy, right? And this idea, once everything's holy, then nothing's holy. Again, I mean, part of what really was funny in his reaction video was the guy points out that, oh, if you want a Christian nation here in the United States, well, it's going to be Roman Catholic, right? Yeah. Because
nothing else can hold a nation.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to pick one form of Christianity to rule over the United States, it's going to be Roman Catholicism, right? And Doug Wilson's response was, "That's a side issue. I'm not going to address it."
Yeah, well, I like this
The
concept.
unification of a church is a side issue.
Yeah, Anselman says, Christ's kingship over the nations is a shared concept, whether Calvinist, Roman Catholic, or Anglican. Look,
Well,
I'm just going to come out and say it. Well, no, I'm going to come out and say it. No, okay, no. The nation is separated by render unto Caesar and by the actions of Jesus, not just render unto Caesar, but the cross, the whole thing. They're separate entities. They're separate principalities. And from those two separate principalities springs a third of money or economics. And that's why there are 3 principalities. See my video on navigating patterns. I'm just saying. It's the best way to think about it, honestly. And when you try to flatten the world again because you want things to be simpler, you make a mistake. That's an error.
I want to let Tayo speak, but responding to Anselman about Christianity, this is somebody who doesn't know what he's talking about.
Don't do
Yeah.
No, you have to dismiss somebody who's it's all noise. You just have to dismiss what they say.
What Anselman I think is referring to is, because I did not disagree with his statement, but I disagree with the way you guys are engaged with it. And I think I disagree with the way he's engaging with it. It's the kingship it's not over the nations, it's Christ's return, and then there will be one nation under Christ. It's not a now thing, it's a resurrection thing. It's not something that we're meant to bring forth now. I found Paul's video yesterday. Sorry, is there feedback from me? Yeah, I found Paul's video yesterday. Interesting, of the book Reformations, speaking about just the shit as I was going on in the church before, just all the corruption, all of it, and also the overreaction that came. Like Jacob, you mentioned the profane. Everything became profane. It's like all rituals. It's like whilst the Catholic Church was trying to combat magic and other things, the Protestants were saying everything the Catholics do it can also be chucked under that bracket. It's just a messy situation that I think Paul's right, we're still trying to figure out, like the mess from that. And part of that is I think one of the solutions that we came up with was secularity, and it's like what came up with, what rediscovered, whichever way you want to say. And I think it served us well, but in like the 21st century, we're gonna have to come up with a new way to engage, because it's no longer working.
Okay, I love this is one of my favorite paintings.
Oh, yeah.
This is the cadaver synod of Pope Formosa, and so they dug him up to have Formosus. They dug him up in order to convict him of heresy, and they actually had a trial of his dead body.
Hey man, it was wacky times, bro. What can I tell you?
And they convicted him, and they I think they beheaded him and cut off his fingers and threw him into the Thames River, or like the Tiber River or whatever. And it's like, there are sometimes you just have to look at the history of the church and realize that if you want proof that Jesus isn't the Messiah, look at the church.
I would say to the contrary. look at the church still standing despite all of this messes, and that is proof that Jesus is the Messiah.
Because it's that framing. It's that framing around the religious religion as such that's so problematic for me. It's like religion is inevitable, and either you understand which religion you're engaging with or you don't.
Right. So the secularity, right? The idea of the profane and the secular actually requires you to recognize, okay, this is holy, this is profane, this is religious, this is secular, right? And without the religious and without the holy, you can't have a profane and secular.
Right.
But what is important, and Protestants don't understand, is without the profane and the secular, you can't have the holy either, and the religious either. Because once everything is religious,
right,
then nothing is religious.
Right. Well, that's Puritanism, right? That's what happens with Puritanism. You make everything about religion, and all of a sudden, look, I mean, the Puritans came to the North America and tried to build the shining city on the hill, and they failed for a reason. And like, they continue to fail for a reason, by the way. Right. And some of them continue to try, but like, yeah, you can't do that. You have to render unto Caesar, man. Like, it's not that hard. The nation belongs to Caesar. It just does. I'm sorry. Are you supposed to be subservient in your service all the way up to God? Yes. And sometimes that means that Caesar throws you to the lions. That is why, as I have said many times, Christians are for lions. And this is actually Ethan, I think it was Ethan that said, if you want to get rid of the Christians on navigating patterns, do a video on Christians are for lions, and they'll all unsubscribe, which is just a joke, by the way, but I found it very funny. And I may actually do that video. But
do it. Guys, this has been really fun. I feel like I've got to meet two of the OGs, and it's nice to connect with you guys, but it's also 3 a.m. and I'll try to get some sleep. But catch you guys.
Well, thank you, Ted. It was great to have you stop in. I hope you stop in again sometime soon.
Will do. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
The thing with Anselman is, yeah, I mean, he thinks I'm ignorant, and the fact is he's ignorant. And the only way to resolve something like that is to actually look at reality. And what a lot of people don't want, they just want to be nice. They don't want to look at the fact that, okay, look, Anselman, I'm glad he's watching. He's welcome to watch. But like, if he were on here, I would kick him off because he knows nothing, and he's very loud about his ignorance.
I don't care if people are loud about their ignorance. I hope they are, so that
no. I want. Well, look, when people are loud, ignorant, they're ignorant loudly. If you don't call out the fact that they're spewing, you're going to have more noise.
Jacob, calm down. You're overstating all of this. I am happy to engage with Anselman precisely because he is a good faith actor, and even though we disagree, I don't think he's exactly ignorant. I think he has.
No, he is exactly ignorant. See, this is the problem, Mark. He is exactly ignorant. He knows nothing.
I don't think that he certainly doesn't know nothing.
It's bad enough.
Overstatement.
It's bad enough that when he says things, it's look. Am I loudly ignorant and a bigot? You have to decide either truth. It's funny. Like Anselman, who thinks. He also thinks Father Stephen DeYoung is ignorant and doesn't know what he's talking about when he's talking about Christianity. And when I talk to Paul Vanderklay doesn't think I'm ignorant about Christianity. And when I talk to Father Eric Seitz, he doesn't think I'm ignorant about Christianity. So you have to decide. Either Anselman's right or I'm right. You can't have it both ways. And this kumbaya,
I agree with the kumbaya stuff, right? And this is why I don't get into theological discussions, right? Because I'm not interested in theology. I think it's a bad game. Like, actually, it's
the most important.
Well, no, we're going to use science and the tools of science to justify our religion.
That's
No, you're
not
not.
theology.
And why
No,
are you
no, no,
bothering?
no, no. You're just plain wrong. That's not theology.
It is theology. It's all propositional.
No, it's not at all.
I don't know what part of theology is not propositional, but if you can explain that, that
All
would
of
be
it.
great.
If you are talking,
All of it.
there are parts which can be. So when there are certain facts which underlie theology, but theology is about all of the things that aren't propositional.
Oh, I appreciate that. I like having fans. Look, again, the way that people are using theology now is to make these scientific justifications for their religion and for their religion and over other people's religion. And I think that's all dumb. Like, I think literally that's all stupid. I'm not saying there's no place for it, but like, why are we playing that game? There's better games to be played that can help people, like by going out and helping people and not worrying about whether or not this Protestant denomination or that particular splinter of the Catholic Church is correct or wrong on a certain issue. Like, this is all wonderful, but it's also esoteric and unimportant to helping people in the world that I just can't see the use of it.
It's so funny to hear you say that, because you agree that religion is foundational to everything we do.
It is, and theology is not foundational to religion at all. Like, it just isn't. And it can't be, because again, you're setting up this trap about, well, then the only people who can engage in religion have to be able to engage in theology, and then that now you have an IQ.
No.
And
No.
I disagree.
You no more need to engage in theology to engage in religion than you need to know how to code in order to use a computer.
Well, then good. Then almost nobody needs to know how to code, and almost nobody needs to know anything about theology. And why are we discussing it? Like, it's still the same argument.
Because
it doesn't change the
what
argument
we're
at all.
doing here, because what we're doing here is application development.
I don't know what I'm doing, but okay. I mean, if that's what you're doing,
That's what
great.
I'm doing here.
But this is why I don't discuss theology explicitly. It's not interesting or important to my project. There's no overlap. Like, your theology is yours. Have fun with it. Go argue it with somebody who's read theology stuff. I haven't.
I do.
Right? No, I don't. I haven't. I haven't read any of it.
No. My channel is mostly theology.
Well, your channel, right. All I'm saying is that's not my project. That's not my channel, right? And that's why I don't discuss it, and I don't claim to be a theologian. Like, and I don't think the discussion of theology is actually all that useful at the end of the day, because you just end up fighting over denominational issues, and you're not looking at what you have in common to engage with, which is a much more interesting conversation to me. Like, well, what can we do that's good and engage with doing the good in the world, right? And yeah, I mean, look, yeah, in some ways, theology. I like this comment, right? Because in some ways, theology is arguing over the narrative and not arguing over the participation. And I'm all for a narrative order, but nitpicking the narrative order is insane, because that's a game that never ends. And there's participation long before you need to play that game. And I'd rather focus on that participation than to focus on the rest of that stuff that's not necessary.
See, this is where I disagree with Vervaeke the most. I think he's trying to have a religion that's not a religion, and frankly, there's a reason why there are no religions that are not a religion.
Well, you look, that's one of his projects, and he neglects it because he doesn't want to lead it, because he's afraid of it, and he's given his reasons why. He says, basically his real excuse is cults of personalities fail because the last cult of personality that tried to do something like that failed when the guy died. And I was like, well, yeah, but that just says that what the guy had was garbage because it couldn't outlast him. Like if you build something that's not bigger than you, then when you die, it goes away. Really, this is shocking. Like, oh, who would have seen that coming? Right? Like these people, really, it's like sometimes these people just say stupid things. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, how didn't you see that? And so rather than blame the fact that the guy didn't build a good system that could outlast him, he blamed the fact that the guy died for the reason why the system didn't last. It's like, how did you get that exactly backwards? And like, how do you know how to breathe? Like, what's going on? Like, why are people getting causality exactly backwards?
Which system are you talking about again?
I forget who he quotes. It was some guy, I think in the 30s or something, that built, roughly speaking, something like religion that was not a religion. And when the guy died, it went away. And then, people point to other things. Like Rudolf Steiner is one that gets pointed to. He's very close to religion that's not a religion, and it outlasted him. But really, it's just a corrupt, lame version of religion that's not a religion.
I ultimately don't think it's possible. I really don't think.
No, I think that the whole thing is stupid. Like, ultimately, if you wanted to take a scientific approach to this, not that I think that's particularly interesting, but if you wanted to, and you took mathematics seriously, you would realize that technically speaking, the fact that we have any religions at all is a miracle, all by itself. If you look at the number of religions that have been started and failed, and you realize how rare it is that they last any time at all, technically, it's statistically impossible to have even one religion. And therefore, religion is a magical, non-technical thing.
Ultimately, I think you should go after the Lindy effect. The religion that's been around the longest is what you should go for.
I like this. That being said, I think the religious people would disapprove of somebody building a religion around Neon Genesis Evangelion or Final Fantasy. They do that now. Like, this is happening all the time. I mean, this is why I don't think it's a culture war. Like, you could say there's a religious war going on, sure. And in my, the pattern of religion video on navigating patterns, that is a case that I make, is that BLM is a religion, and it is fighting with the safety religion, which is the religion of the fake news virus shots and all that nonsense, right? Which is fighting with the climate religion for souls. They're fighting for souls. That's what they're doing. They're fighting for the normative order, if you want to use that three ends of the three ends outline of order, right? It's a fair way to do it. Are they compelling narratives? Well, and that's the thing. Like, this is what the difference between cult and culture, roughly speaking, right? The difference between a cult and a religion. Are they narratives that you can live within, right? If they're not a narrative big enough for you to live in, then they're parasitic and they become a cult. And if they're narratives enough for you to live in, are they big enough for you to live in and thrive in and continue the narrative? And then how big does that have to be? Well, Judaism seems sufficient because it's been around a while. And Christianity would say they have a better story, whatever that means. Like, I don't know how to measure better at that point, right? And the Muslims would say they have a better story. And the Buddhists would say they have a better story. And they'd all probably get into the quantity game of measuring how long they've been around or how many people are part of it or, whatever, right? And that's fine. And that's why I don't get into theology, because, like, who the hell cares? They have enough in common that there's enough going for the good. And if you can contain them instead of allowing them to try to take over the world and universalize, because that I think is bad, then it's not a problem. Like, the Jews have no problem coexisting with the Christians for the most part. It's not an issue. And that's a good thing. And that's what we should be focused on, instead of focusing on the Protestant ethos of splintering and dividing and arguing and theologizing against one another in this big battle of theology. Theology.
Okay. I will agree with you, and it is mostly just Protestant. It's not even a lot of Christianity. That, yeah, they are so over focused on supposed theology but part of the problem there is that they're so strict on their theology that nobody wants to discuss their theology. Like, this is something that I hear Protestant pastors talk about a lot. which is nobody in their church wants to actually discuss theology because they're afraid of getting kicked out of the church.
Right. I noticed that too. It's all the Protestants complaining. And usually it's not even true, right? Or maybe it was true for their church, but it wasn't true for any of the other churches around them. But there are always issues, it seems, in Protestant churches where there are things you cannot discuss. And I like the way Father Eric was talking about it before, where he's basically saying, well, look, if you go to your priest in private, it's not an issue. Yeah, if you stand up in the middle of Mass, it's a problem.
Well,
you wouldn't do that as a Catholic anyway, though. Like,
yeah,
Catholics have a safeguard against this stuff.
Getting kicked out of a Catholic church is really difficult. See Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a coincidence, right? It's not a coincidence because you see clones in a lot of the popular movies and media. Yeah, the movies and media are driving a lot of stuff, and you do see a lot of things in there. And I talk about that on my other channel, on my private YouTube channel. That's not private. On my personal YouTube channel, I talk about some of those patterns because I really like what the Anadromist did, what Burn Power did with the How We Got Here series. For example, Tony Stark is a kind of Christ figure. Yeah, when he sacrifices himself. Well, look, the thing that I've been doing lately is checking out these stories, and I just did this recently with, like I said, I'm rewatching Andromeda. Fascinating. Episode 2. Like, wow, meaning crisis all over the place. And meaning crisis solved. Like, it's hysterical. I rewatched Tron Legacy. I love Tron. I own it. Very unusual. I don't own any movies. I own a handful. I own Tron Legacy. I rewatched Tron Legacy, and then like new tool upgrade. Didn't realize I had this new tool upgrade from Peugeot and engaging with all of you lovely people in this corner of the internet. And I went, holy macaroni! The reason why people like this movie is because there's the Christ, a motif, and there's this other pattern, and right. So you see these patterns because they work. Like, I mean, there's something to so if you watch my video on story, narrative, and archetype, the story is the implementation, the archetype is the template, and the templates point to the archetype, right? So it's story, narrative, template, archetype is sort of the pure Platonic form or something. The eidos. I like eidos better. And so any number of stories are possible, but the only ones we resonate with are ones with narrative components in them, ones that are pointing up to that narrative template or that embody pieces of narrative templates, or however you want to frame it. Doesn't really matter. I know it's sloppy, but it's okay to be sloppy, right? The stuff that fits narratives, good narratives in particular, and we can argue about good narrative later, that's the stuff that's popular. And then you see these patterns in those stories, like the Christ, the resurrection, you see redemption, right? You see failure and hard work and attempt, and then eventual success. These are the hero's journey, right? Which Campbell honestly doesn't understand his own work. No, really. I was shocked when I found that out, but I watched interviews with him on PBS, and I was like, holy shit, dude. You don't know your own work, you muppet. That's valid. But there's way more than that. That was way deeper than like Campbell was talking about. Campbell just scratched the surface of this stuff. Good stories follow narrative patterns, period. And bad stories can follow good narrative patterns, but try to put a good spin on a bad narrative. So for example, a lot of people don't know this. In the Matrix, all the people are valuing freedom over comfort to a ridiculous, absurd degree, which is part of the reason why the movie doesn't work, right? Because it's basically telling you these people would rather not have a home, live in the sewers of dead cities, not dead cities, the sewers of dead cities, right? And be constantly chased by the evil technology monster. That's what they would rather do than be slaves, effectively. Right, than have any form of slavery at all where they were cooperating with the system. Of course, ultimately, a new cooperation is arrived at as a result of Neo becoming Neo and all that. But the point is, in the beginning, they'd really rather live in someplace that can't eat real food, and they're eating slop that barely keeps them alive. Like, this is explicit in the film, right? And so, in a way, those narrative patterns are there, but there's no redemption. There's redemption for single characters, no redemption for humankind. there's no development arc for the rest of the characters. Like they don't. There's only one character arc in the first movie. It's really weird. So there's but there's the Jesus thing. There's this definite resurrection. There's the partial development of Neo into the One, roughly speaking. But there's no character development before that, for example, right? And the opportunity is there in Metacortex when the guy says, or you choose to show up at work on time because you're part of the system, and he rejects all of that, right? And people miss all these that's bad narrative. It's within the narrative pattern, but it's bad messaging around the narrative. And that causes friction that we don't even realize. We get colonized by it, we'll say subconsciously. And look, there's all kinds of little hints in the Matrix, like cipher, meaning zero in Arabic, or empty, empty, right? And he is the betrayer. Emptiness, nihilism is the betrayer. That's good narrative. That's why that character works so well. And he has an arc, right? And he gets sacrificed for his bad behavior, roughly speaking. And that's good. He gets defeated by the forces of good. Like, definitely. But it's couched within this other narrative. And that's part of why I want to do my framing video, because it's really hard to see narratives, especially in the postmodern error, as I like to call it, not era, but error, because these frames are getting embedded and they're getting twisted, and people are using them against you in ways you don't understand. And then you fall into the trap of believing you can do the same thing to some extent. And then bang, the red brick wall of reality and your car meet at 90 miles an hour, and there's pieces everywhere. And now you have to pick them up and reconstruct. And that's a problem. Like, this is bad. I don't like that. A lot of people just suicide out. A lot of people just hit the drugs, and that's the end of them, and it's no good. I don't like any of it. I don't want to have people hit bottom to save them. I think that's a terrible strategy. And maybe it's necessary, but I'm still going to try for better, because I'm aiming at the good. What do you think of that outline, Jacob, with the story, narrative, and archetype?
What was going through my mind was Pajot constantly saying that Jesus's story is the perfect story, and the fact that it's just a bad idea to have a perfect story. And so,
that would be my argument too.
If that's, when you were saying there's no character development other than for Neo, it's like, well, of course not, because it's all about, well, I mean, the Coen brothers now they were trying to steal from many, many different things. Well, I shouldn't say steal. They were trying to use many, many things. And I loved the first movie so much that I ended up watching the second and the third, and they were progressively worse, like so many things are, because we have a society that seems to be losing its steam.
Yeah, well, look, I often use the Matrix for this example. I don't agree. I think, look, the second and third movies had too much flash and flare. The fight scenes were too long, right? They were focused too much on that. But the philosophy was deeper. So there was less philosophy, but it was much deeper. They were deeper down the deeper rabbit holes, I would say. And that I actually really liked. I like that about the second and third movies. But I think that when you ask somebody what makes The Matrix a good movie, and it's a good example to use, they will say something like, oh, that cool special effect, that bullet time effect, right? Or they will say something like, oh, well, the care in the cinematography, because there was a lot of care in the cinematography for sure. And these are important aspects, right? But the thing that makes a good movie, and this is the thing that Critical Drinker focuses on more than anyone else that I've seen with movie reviews, is the story. how good a story is it? Which is to say, how well are you embodying narrative patterns? And there's way more narrative pattern embodiment in a good movie than you realize until you start looking. And then all of a sudden you find out that Tron Legacy has all of these, like Tron Legacy is a rejection of Western Buddhism and shows the problem with Western Buddhism. And oddly, I didn't see that. And I had seen that movie at least 6 times because I actually love that movie for lots of different reasons. And I had never noticed it until 2 months ago or whatever, when I rewatched the movie because I wasn't feeling well. And then all of a sudden, all these new tools kick in. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I never noticed any of this. What's going on? This is wild. I'm like, they reject Western Buddhism right here and say the problem with inaction is nothing happens. And you're in a stalemate forever. That's a theme in Tron Legacy. Like it's one of the core themes in Tron Legacy. The other one is the sacrifice, the father sacrifices for the son to save the son. Right. And also the future, right, which is embodied in the feminine character. Like it's all right there. It's really brilliant. It's a much more brilliant movie than I was appreciating before. And it's easy to say, well, what's right about that movie? Well, it's got cool special effects and it's got cool characters and there's a character development arc, but it's actually so much more. And when we go to make a sequel, and you see this in the Matrix sequels, what made the movie cool? Bullet time. I know, let's put twice as much bullet time in the freaking movie. No, you ruined the movie by doing that. It would have been a much better movie. Not that it wasn't a good movie. I still like the second and third movies. Would have been a much better movie if you cut each of those action scenes in half. The action scenes themselves would have been better, and the movie would have been better. The storyline would have been much more fun.
When was Tron Legacy made?
I don't remember. 2014?
No wonder I didn't see it. I refuse to go see any movie made after the year 2000 unless several people recommend it to me. I went and saw Joker and I liked it. But
Joker was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it was still a deeply left-wing liberal movie, but it was still a work of art as opposed to a work of propaganda. By the way, not sure if you're aware of what's been going on Twitter the last few hours, but like
not the last few hours, no.
A bunch of left-wing journalists were able to get themselves apparently they deliberately did it, at least if that tweet that I saw was real. They got themselves banned. Keith Olbermann apparently he's apparently perma-banned because he coordinated it, because he wanted to so Elon Musk's new doxing rule since what happened with his son yesterday.
Yeah.
So they deliberately went against it by posting the location of his jet. And so he went ahead and banned a bunch of them, and they're all losing their minds.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised. Plus, a lot of people don't realize this. There are a lot of people who believe, A, that the world works a certain way, so they have a model in their head, but B, that if they lived in that world, they know how to be the hero in that world, and they're desperate to be heroes. So what they're doing is they're trying to make that world real. Like they are trying to resurrect Hitler from the dead. No, I'm not being hyperbolic. They are, because they believe they know how to defeat Hitler and they would be the hero in that story. And that's like, people discount this entirely. I'm like, no. That's a lot of what's going on. That's actually a lot of what's happening around you, because people are trying to enact a bad world on purpose because they believe if they lived in that bad world, they would be the hero. And that's a lot of bad things that are happening.
There are a lot of people who are trying to refight World War II because they think they could win it better.
Well, and it's part of the collapsing, right? There's no evil in the world except Hitler, and he's in the past, so that's fine. but now I know how to be a moral and ethical agent in the world. And no, you don't. Like, you're a lunatic. Like, this is lunacy. I mean, this is literally like I am having so many arguments with people, like people that work at banks. I tried to explain to them about, the lawsuit and what happened with my house, and they're like, no, banks aren't evil. They would never do that. I'm like, no, banks are definitely evil. I worked at a bunch of them, and they would do that.
So that was the other news that got kind of overshadowed by everything that's going on. Tucker Carlson apparently just confirmed that the CIA killed JFK.
That's fascinating. As Douglas Murray says, we have a supply and demand issue for white supremacists. Yeah, we really do. We really do. Yeah, and that's the problem, is that if that's your narrative and that's the story you can be the hero in, then you want that story. If you think you know how to solve bread lines, you're going to try to make sure there are bread lines. If you think you know how to solve racism, you're going to give bricks to black people in their own neighborhoods so they can destroy their own neighborhoods. Like, we saw that happened.
Okay, I love the fact you didn't even blink when I said the CIA killed JFK.
Yeah, that was very funny.
I wasn't going to go down that rabbit hole.
I thought you were like, well, everybody knew that. Why is this news?
I have my own theories. Richard, welcome. What tickled your fancy enough to come up and join us?
Well, you were talking about Tron Legacy, and I think Tron Legacy was the first film in which I cried at the end, as like a little wee boy seeing the father sacrifice for his son. So that reminded me of touching memories. So.
That's fascinating. I like that. That's an interesting story. I have been outed, unfortunately. Damn it. I did wink or wince or whatever, but just not with the eye you can see. I think that is probably accurate. I've been outed by my own audience. Betrayers, all of you. Yeah, I mean, I can see why people would cry at Tron Legacy, especially a child, because there is that sacrificial element, and the story's brilliant. And man, the thing that blew me away about that movie was the music. And it turns out that Daft Punk did a bunch of interesting and unique things, when making that soundtrack. And I love Daft Punk anyway, but like, that really puts it over the edge. The music they did for that movie is really good, but the story's really good too.
I thought if it's not Beethoven, you don't listen to it.
Whoa!
No, I don't listen to Beethoven all that often, unfortunately. Usually, when I'm in the bath for a long time, I'll put on Beethoven Sixth and relax. But that's not my classical. Is not my go-to. Lately, jazz has been tickling my fancy.
Jazz. What kind of jazz, Mark?
I like a lot of the improv jazz stuff, which is very hard to find because the radio is full of radio type jazz, and some of that's okay. But I like going out to, if I can get out somewhere where they're playing jazz and I'm feeling well enough to do that, then I will go out and catch a bar with a jazz band. Yeah, but I like the really impromptu, crazy jazz stuff that's not too crazy.
Yeah. Me too. That's my favorite stuff as well.
But some of the classic jazz, like Dizzy Gillespie and stuff like, some of these guys, they've just done some great work, even though it's recorded. But I still go to rock and roll and listen to a lot of rock music. And actually today's been a very strange day because I've had various Tool songs running through my head. I'm like, we need to play some Tool. That's what we need to do. That's when things get done. I play Tool, everything happens all at once because I just run it 1,000 miles an hour. And just
really? That's interesting. My father dragged me to a Tool concert in Vegas.
Oh, wow.
I think that was earlier this year. And that was shocking. Because that was my first really heavy rock sort of concert, and it was a lot. It was good though. It was good.
Tool is amazing. They are a transcendently good band. Like
Yeah.
it's
Oh yeah.
there's a handful of good bands, and they're like in that handful for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go prepare my video attack on Doug Wilson. I'll talk to you guys later.
See you, Jacob. Good to see you.
Right.
Thanks for stopping in. Yeah. So Richard, I don't know if you've. So one thing that I turned people onto was, if you were into Metallica or Tool or any of those guys, try listening to some of those songs after doing Maps of Meaning. Talk about patterns. So
Right.
in particular, Tool 46 and 2. Like the whole meaning of 46 and 2 changes when you know a little bit of Jung, especially if you've engaged with Peterson. Like that whole thing just changes the whole song, like just alters. And it's like, oh wow. And that's a change in framing,
Huh. Interesting. Huh. Yeah. I'll like to finish Massive Meaning and then do that because I only made it halfway through. I was doing it for a school project.
The book, I mean, I'm just watching the lecture series
the
alone.
The book is worth it. I really like the
The
book.
book's insane.
Well,
Have you seen that book? It's nuts. I can't even start it.
The audiobook. Do the audiobook.
Nah.
No, because
Audiobooks are evil. The only thing more evil than printed books are audiobooks, and you can't burn them, so I'm really not a fan.
The audiobook just feels like Peterson lecturing because it's read by Peterson, so it just feels normal.
I gotcha.
So,
I don't.
Why are audiobooks evil?
I don't retain audiobooks the same way.
The same way.
Yeah. No, I mean, I listened to Harry Potter and I listened to Dune, the first 2 Dune books, and I can't tell you anything about them.
Really?
I mean, I got all the themes and everything because I get patterns pretty easily, but I don't remember. Like, and when people talk about stuff, I go, yeah, I knew that, but I can't. Like, I didn't read it, so I'm a visual person, so my eidetic memory, which does work rarely enough, like there's something to that. Like my audio memory is very different, modifies everything I hear gets modified immediately. Things that I read don't all get modified immediately, but most of them do, unfortunately. I can't do quotes very well at all.
Okay. Yeah,
I used to keep quotes like in my wallet and stuff because I couldn't memorize them.
Right. Yeah, I've always thought that I was more auditory. But I don't know. I need to think about it more because the whole podcast and YouTube thing makes it seem like I'm auditory. But then I've tried some audiobooks, and I feel like it is based on the content. Like some content just goes way over.
It probably depends on a lot of factors. So one of the things is I read really slowly because I'm massively dyslexic, like really bad, and people don't notice because it's a lot of effort, but I make it like not obvious. I've got lots of methods to help me, but because I'm dyslexic, I read really slowly, like really, really, really slowly. But that also helps me absorb material. So it's kind of like, oh, well, but this is actually an advantage because otherwise I'd just read too fast and probably retain none of it. That's just a guess. Although I read The Bridge of San Luis Rey when I was a kid because I had to for school the night before and read a book report. And I read the book. I wrote the book report. I cannot tell you one damn thing about that freaking stupid book. It's a short book too, as I recall. So I think, if I go too fast, I don't retain. Or I don't retain in the same way because the book report I scored fine on it. I test well anyway.
Right.
Oh, here we go, Chris. You watch the Tucker report. It's an anonymous source from the CIA, and the files are still sealed. Yeah, after 1,000,000 years. Yeah, I could go on about JFK and conspiracy, but I don't think it's helpful. If somebody jumps in and really pushes me, I might go down that rabbit hole. But I don't think so. I don't think that's the pattern to be navigating at the moment. That is funny though. It's always, yeah, people are always saying weird stuff. There was a good documentary that came out about that had really good evidence that was the case. They had really good reasoning for why, but it's always hard to tell.
So what's the motive then?
The motive?
Yeah.
The CIA is generally evil, especially back then. But also he was pretty pissed off at them for Bay of Pigs because they did a bunch of sneaky stuff around the Bay of Pigs to force JFK, and he did take responsibility for it, but they're just ungrateful bastards. Aren't they supposed to declassify everything after a period of time legally, or am I making this up? You're not making this up. What you're missing is Congress at the time in the 70s, I think it was, classified all the stuff extra long. And actually, when Bill Clinton was elected, that's one of the things he said: if I'm elected, I'm going to open up these files. And he never did because he's not a good person. It's like the first Satan incarnate president. Yeah, he didn't do that. He also covered up the military for the burning of the illegally burned material at Groom Lake, Area 51. So yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff in Clinton's past for sure around military secrecy. And maybe that's for the best. Like, I don't want to be too harsh. Like, if everybody knew how evil the CIA was, the CIA would be in trouble. So, although maybe now's the time because they have become excessively corrupt, in my opinion. And I could be wrong about that because what do I know? But it's always a possibility that we should consider. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out about that. Yeah, the thesis was cool because it was Lee Harvey Oswald was headed towards a CIA safe house.
Mm-hmm.
And that was run by the Cubans or something weird because there was this weird American-Cuban connection. And that I actually found really compelling because it's one of the holes in the story is, there are several, but one of the holes in the story was always, why was he going the direction he was going in when he was caught? Like, that makes no sense because it wasn't like he was going back home. And it wasn't like he was going to the Russian embassy. And, there were all kinds of possibilities. But CIA safe house makes the most sense. Oh, okay. Oh, we want to go to Snowden? Okay, yeah, sure. This is easy, okay? And I want to make this clear. Assange good, Snowden evil. Really not that hard. Snowden did not vet any of his material, did not make any attempt to do so, and got a lot of people killed. Therefore, he's a bad person. Sorry. Just is what it is. He also revealed stuff that everybody knew 2 years before, and that was how he got popular. And so I'm very pissed off about that. Like, Snowden these tech people that think they're smart and know things in the world, I'm not a fan. Because I've worked with too many of them, and most of them are complete morons. And some of them know a little bit of tech. But I'm not impressed by what you know about tech. Sorry. I know a lot about tech, like a real lot, like a frightening amount, like an impossible amount by all accounts. And yet, and not everything by any stretch because tech is endless. But yeah, I'm rarely impressed by tech people. Snowden strikes me as the type of arrogant tech bastard that I didn't like, that did a poor job. Not that he couldn't swoop in and save the day, but that he would wait until he had to. And I don't like that kind of behavior. I believe you get out in front of problems and you fix them before they happen when you can, which is ironic because I get hired a lot of times when people hit the wall and like, oh my goodness, my development team can't write software anymore without writing 1 million bugs. Yeah, okay, bring in Mark. He'll show you how to do releases. Everything will be fine. That was my bread and butter for years. No one does releases anymore, so hence no employment for Mark anymore. Even though I make software teams so much better, and it's so easy for me, it's like ridiculous. Snowden bad. He's just an arrogant tech guy. I don't like them. He didn't do good things. Nothing good came out of what he did. So and I'm not a consequentialist, but what he did was breaking a lot of rules, and he should have known better. And whereas Assange took actually a lot of care, and you can argue that he made mistakes or whatever, but you can't argue about his aim being pure, for example. Well, I'm glad you found that helpful. Yeah, and I have a very simple way of thinking about these things. So, and that I think is an advantage. Like I don't get complicated about, well, on page 93 of what Snowden released, it's crazy. Like you can always find a good in the bad. I'm trying to measure, bulk results, not exceptions. We're stuck in a world of measuring exceptions. Oh yeah, I like this. Tech is not the same as, say, having a basic clue. Exactly. Well, this is the autism, right? A lot of people with autism do very well in tech. They're high autism materialists, and they can function in tech, and they can't function with people in the real world. That happens all the time. That's not a trope. That's an actual pattern in the world. It's an interesting one.
Makes sense.
Yeah, same for a lot of scholarship, right? You see that with teachers. Like they're really good with the material, but they don't teach it very well because teaching is an art and it's really hard, and there aren't a lot of good teachers. In some ways, Salman Khan Academy, excellent stuff. Everybody tried to copy him and almost nobody was successful. But he kind of single-handedly, almost literally single-handedly launched the whole online learning revolution. And yeah, his stuff is so much better than everybody else's who came after him.
Yeah.
And had better approaches. It's just insane. But he's a good teacher. And it's very hard to find good teachers. You can't teach somebody to teach, and you can't just teach people. And his teaching style is really good. I used to use Khan Academy all the time. I still use it occasionally. But I used to use it all the time because I just need to learn something. I'm like, okay, Salman Khan knows how to teach things, and he does it concisely. And I really like concision, so that's my thing.
Yes, Khan Academy is the lifeblood of high school and college math students.
I wish they had that when I was in school, man. I would have, but I mean, I'd still get to benefit from it, and like I took the first, big online machine learning course from Andrew Ng out in, I think it's Stanford. It's one of those crazy Western schools that otherwise sucks. But I did that in a weekend because I'm a crazy person, and I absorbed it all. It was wonderful and it was very helpful. But the real value to the course, according to people who attended it, were the TAs and learning MATLAB, and I didn't get any of that, and I'm actually upset about that. But the limitations of online learning. You can either learn online with a bunch of people, or you can get personalized learning from the TAs in the classroom. This is why you pay the money, and it's not equivalent. Not that it's not good. Like I like online learning. I've done a ton more of it than most people. But it's not a panacea either. There's some downsides. You're missing stuff. The participation, for example, with MATLAB with a TA, that might be something, huh? Participatory knowledge. Who knows?
But then you have Peterson's, what is it called? Peterson Academy. For $4,000, what is it? $4,000 BA is what he's trying to do.
What do you think about Peter Thiel's criticism that we have been overemphasizing STEM, absolutely, and underemphasizing humanities, kind of? So all the intelligent people went to STEM.
Hey.
I don't know about that. I mean, Richard's a good example of the people who can't make it in STEM going into humanities. Sorry, Richard, but you're here, and I need a little levity.
I see you here. I can do calculus.
We could use intelligent people in humanities. Yeah, I think the problem is it's not humanities that we need, it's wisdom. And where you get wisdom from, and this is something, I wish I wasn't fully together at Thunder Bay. I really wanted to mention to Peugeot, to mention to Peterson that classical liberal is a thing, and liberal is not the same thing. Like there's actually a distinction there. So when you're saying classical liberal, what that means to me, what Peterson's actually saying is that he is a liberal grounded in the classical Greek and Roman tradition and philosophical tradition. And that makes all the difference, because your liberalism is constrained by that set of virtues and values. And the way we use modern liberal, we have removed Plato and Aristotle and, all these other, all the Western canon, actually, roughly speaking. And now liberal doesn't mean anything, because it just means absolute freedom all the time to do whatever you want. And so humanities has become corrupted by that, because it's not humanities, it's a study of the classics. And humanities is a modern corruption of the study of the classics, of the classical way of understanding philosophy as such. And philosophy is different from religion and cannot replace it. I got to do a video on that one of these days, like my conception of philosophy versus religion and why it matters, and what philosophy can and can't do, right? And the boundaries of science. Although you have a video on science, oh shoot, I gotta prep that for tomorrow. I want to release the video on science tomorrow. Get another video. I'm probably gonna release that, and then I'm gonna try to record 2 more at least by the end of next week, because I want to try to get 2 videos out a week for the rest of December. I wanted to do it for all of December, but I suck. So yeah, I'm gonna push though. I'm gonna do a push here for sure. Yeah, and that's really the problem. All right, see, good. Somebody doesn't hate me. Love the eyeglass. Good. I'm glad somebody loves it. Amazon, like $10, man. Not bad. Handmade too. Very nice. I like that a lot. Yeah, I think that understanding that the humanities are corrupt is important. And I think that what actually happened was, we elevated intelligence through the veneration of knowledge to a high value, when in fact it's worthless and worth nothing. No, really, actually. Stupid, kind people are actually worth something, and intelligent people, if that's all they have, which a lot of them only have that, not Richard, because he's taking humanities, then they're no good to me. Like, honestly, first of all, are you really that intelligent? Like, and second of all, what good is this intelligence of yours doing me? I don't know. And see, this is important. Very cool. Thank you for the positive feedback. Positive feedback, important. All these intelligent naysayers, no good to me. You are no good to me. So, but I mean, I think that's important. It's important to realize that we venerated intelligence and knowledge up to a level. And then everybody went that route, because that gave you a certainty around things. And I liked, who was discussing this earlier? Because this came up earlier today in a video. Oh yeah, I was watching Cale Zeldin's talk with Grim Grizz, which I did not yet finish. I'm in the middle of 3 videos, and I'm like halfway through all of them.
Me too.
Cale Zeldin was talking to Grim Grizz, and like I'm watching it. It's fascinating. I haven't finished it. It's great. It's great. I'm more than halfway through, I think. Or right about halfway through. And they were talking about the anxiety of the middle class, that the game that they're playing with their children by putting them in these good schools and these good private schools, hoping that they'll get into at least a mid-tier university, and then hoping that that will give them connections and jobs. The anxiety that is not going to work is very high in that group, right? Because they realized this game was stupid, and now that game is crumbling, because it was only, like, you can give PhDs to too many people, and then they drive cabs for a living like they do in Germany. No, really, this has already happened in Germany, right? That's no good. Or in, worse yet, in India, everyone's got a degree in India, and almost nobody's doing degree jobs because there's 8 zillion people.
Okay, so this is an interesting point. I clicked on an old Thomas Sowell video from it was from the 90s, and he made an argument against public schooling by saying that if you force everyone into education, even people who don't want to be educated, then it's like everyone standing in a football stadium.
Yep.
It's like, and it's like that argument has completely disappeared, which I was pretty shocked by. but I
Right.
think it does have some merit for sure.
Right, exactly. Well, I like what Benjamin Franklin said here. I don't think that's his real name. I mean, it could be, but there could be a potential criticism that Plato, Aristotle, and all have been a subject of a lot of criticism over time, and history is moving, and we have to adapt. Okay, yeah, but that's wrong, and it's obviously wrong because history, if it doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So that destroys that. Also, patterns. Like this is what this is about. So the fact that Heidegger knew for sure, and Nietzsche probably knew and didn't quite admit it, but did indicate that they didn't get past Plato, is a good indication that Plato was just the smartest guy ever. Like honestly, like that could be true. I don't know.
Yeah,
Could be true.
or he was the first smart person to figure out those ideas.
Right.
Yeah.
He got to the end of it, and that's the end of it. Like that's as far as you can take it, which is why Heidegger turned on Plato, right? Because he couldn't get past him, and he knew that, and he wrote that. Like he wrote that, he knew that, he said that, right? Like, and Nietzsche said very similar things, although Nietzsche was a bastard and didn't really admit that Plato got past him, and you know, maybe that's because it can't be done. Maybe. I don't know, but I suspect that's the case, like very strongly. After a couple thousand years, you begin to get the idea that, you know, the Lindy effect. After a couple thousand years, maybe you can't get past Plato because you haven't been able to. Fair enough. Like, and I get the critique of critique of critique. This is the postmodern mind virus destroying our civilization. I like that. My buddy Jonathan says that postmodernism is a civilization destroying mind virus. That is correct. Like, yes, it is. It is purely parasitic. You know, I posted my postmodern video earlier. You can scroll up. Yeah, I mean, there is no good in it, right? And this is the one that stumps everybody. He goes, "I'm going to defend postmodernism against you, Mark." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, are you really now? I've played this game a lot, and I'm guaranteeing you ain't played this game as much as I have. Bring it, baby, bring it." And I go, "Show me the good in postmodernism," and that's the end of them. And I usually don't open with that move because that's just mean. Like when you have a nuclear weapon and that's your first shot, that's mean. And I do have a nuclear weapon. I save it for last. But yeah, they can't answer any of my damn questions. It's not that hard. And beware of people who can't answer easy questions. Like, is cannibalism wrong if it's contracted between two individuals? The answer is yes. Cannibalism is still wrong. It's an easy question, right? It takes a 4-second answer. It's not hard, right? And if you can't do that, maybe you're not an ethical person. Like maybe you're not a moral agent in the world, like Sam Harris, who was never a moral agent in the world, by the way. See my video on highest value in Sam Harris. What do we got here? What about the risk of the end of history? I don't know why the end of history would be a concern or a risk. Let's suppose the end of history is about to happen tomorrow. What the hell are you going to do about it? Yes, nothing. That's what you're going to do. Nothing, because you're a nothing person. But let's suppose that the end of history isn't going to happen tomorrow if you enact the good. What should you do? You should enact the good. Let's suppose you don't know if the end of history is going to happen. Should you enact bad things or good things? It's still enact the good. So you can see the way in which, without knowing the answer, without having a prediction, without having an expectation, you can still do the right thing. And that right thing makes all of the bad expectations or the endings or the bad endings less likely. So there's no reason to try to predict that kind of a future, right? So you prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and do the good. Struggle to do the good. I actually came up with this formula. I posted it on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter pretty easily. But I did post this on Twitter. I just want to read it out because I want to make sure I get it right because it's sort of new to me, and I had to write it down to get it. Point at the good, call out bad, spend most of your time doing as much good as best as you are able. Like I think that's like the formula for a proper life. No prediction. I'm not saying don't ever try to predict anything. I'm saying you don't need prediction. You can point at the good. You can call out bad. You can spend most of your time doing as much good as best as you are able. Like, really, you can do that. It doesn't even take any intelligence. You don't need education, or at least much. Like, you just, like, all these ridiculous things are unnecessary. You can just do that, and you'll live a fairly good life. I know it's very, very Epicurean. Richard, what were you saying about the Peterson Academy?
Well,
right.
Mark, you were talking about the value of participatory learning, and like, what's the benefit of that when Peterson wants to make a BA online for 4,000 versus what my school is 30,000 a semester for in person?
Yeah, look, I mean, I love Jordan Peterson. I try very hard not to criticize Jordan Peterson because he's successful. And I don't know what parts of his success are deliberate or which parts, are good and whatnot. But what he's doing with Peterson Academy is probably an error because it's training. And I have a video on training versus education. You should check it out. It's awesome. Mostly because all my videos are awesome. But that one actually, it's a later video. It's really good. Education is all about the knowledge of how to participate in the world. Education has nothing to do with learning facts and figures and getting an A on a test. Nothing. That's training.
Right. Yeah, and this is the idea of the liberal arts. That, yeah.
It's part of the original idea of liberal arts, of a classical education.
Yeah.
And we've renamed classical education liberal arts, and that's an error. Like, that's just wrong. They're not liberal arts. That's not what they are. The ancient Greeks were not liberals. They were illiberal by all modern standards.
Right.
Sorry, it's the illiberal arts, and it's the Western canon. And look, I hate to break this to you guys, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I will just tell you a fact. They did this on purpose. I talked to them. They said, yes, I'm not joking, like this in Boston. We did this on purpose. We renamed it liberal arts so that we could update it all for the modern era. Yes, they did. They did. They deliberately did. And this actually happened. It's not a conspiracy. It actually happened. I mean, it's a conspiracy in the classic sense of 9 people smoking cigar in a back room, except they didn't do it secretly. They all admitted they were doing this. Like, you can read it. It's not hard. You have to read contemporary literature about these people, but yeah. And look, I mean, I agree. The same problem with PragerU to some extent. Now, the problem is you still need some base level of training, like in some way in. The problem is that works for people like me, it works for people like Richard, it works for people like Jacob, right? Some people are really good at propositional knowledge and turning it into ways to participate in the world. Those people are rare. That's really the problem. And so this is the question. Do you do training at school, right? And so again, my distinction is if you can grade it on a test, it's training. And if you can't grade it on a test, it's education because you're learning how to learn, roughly speaking.
Right. Yeah.
Like, education is the learning of the ability to forward your own thinking on your own, right? By getting new facts.
Well,
So,
okay, go ahead with.
So my point of view is that the end of history happens when there is some kind of impression that we already are in the perfect good and with the perfect knowledge of the perfect philosophy. Well, that would be the end of history if your attitude was utopian, right? But I don't, like, utopia is not real, so it's okay. Conspiracies can be true. Yes, some conspiracies are true. That is the problem.
So Mark, because you just said that the education is, what did you say? Learning how to learn for yourself.
Right, roughly speaking. Yeah, exacting the skills that allow you to exact more skills or something, right? Like you can expand your own learning on your own using other tools rather than relying on a teacher.
So what is the relationship between that and the Western canon? Because I've actually mentioned the program that I'm going through, and basically they're trying to teach you they're trying to educate you through the canon, and you said to me before
Right.
that isn't good because basically it's already been done. So why?
No. It's how you do it. Like, there's nothing wrong with the Western canon, but it matters how you do it, and it matters what you're doing. So, if by Western canon you mean the modern, or rather
No.
postmodern idea, then you failed, right? But if by Western canon, and Schuyler talks about this, so if you haven't seen Agapic Orientation, Manuel's wonderful YouTube channel,
Yeah,
I'll show
you
it
need to
here.
watch. I subscribe, but I haven't watched.
Yeah, Agapic Orientation is wonderful. So on Agapic Orientation, Manuel has a 4-hour video, and it is 4 hours, but it does have the wonderful Schuyler in it. And
Mhm.
Schuyler is wonderful and awesome and super bright, and everybody should engage with Schuyler because he's really interesting, even when he's like crazy manic. And also Nick, Fort Cult Nick, very important. But on there is that video, and in there, Schuyler talks about his philosophy teacher, I believe, and his philosophy teacher used to play this trick on them, basically. And what he would say is, "Here's this philosophy," and he'd present it as though it were true, and he believed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he'd start the next section, he'd say, "All that stuff I just told you, I don't believe any of that, and it's all garbage, roughly speaking." And then he'd start over and do the trick again. So what you're doing there is you're training people to build frameworks and believe in them, and then you're destroying those frameworks and training to build another one and believe in them. Okay? That is proper education. Right? And how do you grade somebody on how good their paper is? Right? Like, that's proper education. So I had an English teacher, and Mr. O'Rourke, awesome English teacher. So this is private school, private Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
So I have Mr. O'Rourke, and we get in the class, and he says, you know, you need to know a few things. And he's this relatively burly looking guy, pretty gruff, you know, a little unshaven. We're all wearing suit coats and ties, and this guy is not up there yet. One of the best teachers I ever had, by far, total life changer. And he says, one of the things you need to know is I do not give out 100s. That does not happen in my classes. You know, not never ever, but almost never ever. And of course, you know, this is young me. Young me is like, challenge accepted. I will break you, sir. I will. and I did, because I do. I do impossible things all the time. It's very annoying to people who who believe in impossibility. He would grade the paper based on criteria that he couldn't explain to the kids. Right. So you were very much getting a blind grade. And that class, that English class, here was our English class. You're going to freaking love this. Here's a book. Read the first chapter. Write a paragraph on it. Paragraph has to be this long. That was the whole freaking class.
Right.
I think 2 or 3 years. Yeah, 2 years I had him. That was the whole freaking English class. Right. We didn't do anything else. The whole English class was read the book and discuss. So you were reading the book, writing these papers, some of the papers, and of course my papers got read because I got hundreds. Because yeah, I did. Of course, I can also write. Everybody in my family can write. Everybody.
That's good.
Everybody. Right. So I was able to learn through that iterative process of getting my ass handed to me and not getting hundreds every time, which very much annoys me to this day, as you can tell. But you know, you're not supposed to. Like, duh, idiot. It was a goal of mine. I'm never going to get not 100. Of course, I failed at that miserably. I got 400s from him. I probably have them all. It's still a big deal. And Mr. Rourke was a bastard. Like, you know, he would do subtle things like we're reading Call of the Wild and we're getting to the, you know, the man in the red sweater, and he comes in wearing a red sweater. Oh yeah, he was a subtle little manipulative bastard. And I loved every minute of it. And it taught me so much about the world and things I don't even know. I don't know that I know them from him.
Yep.
But that was education. Like, what are you grading your damn English papers on when someone's writing a paragraph about a chapter of a book?
Right.
I don't know. When they're writing a book report, how are you grading that? You know,
Yeah,
and I'm not saying you can't. I'm saying that, doing that well is education, and it's
yeah,
hard.
and it's like you can sort of dance around it. It's like, how would you describe it? It's like you're looking for the student's ability to recognize and articulate relevant patterns in the text. Right?
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, it depends. Like, there's lots of ways to grade those papers, and they're all valid. And I think, Mr. O'Rourke was using a number of them. And,
Right.
but really, what he was telling us when he was saying, I don't give you 100, is no one makes my heart sing.
Mm.
That's what he was really ultimately at the end of the day saying, like, no one moves me. Right. And I was like, oh, you're the immovable object, eh? Well, I'm the unstoppable force. Let's dance, and I won that dance a couple times. God damn it.
Right.
And it was hard. And I had, at one point we read Sounder. I don't know if you've read Sounder.
I have.
Required reading. So we get into this book, and like everyone's reading the first chapter and they're all laughing. And he's like, no, pay attention. And like, he's berating us, the whole class. And it's a small class. There's 10 people in a class or something.
Yeah,
So
right,
not
right.
even cool. Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And then, like, so he made us take that freaking dipshit book seriously. And then at the end, literally, like last day, he said, man, that's a garbage book. And I think he actually picked it up and threw it across the room. It was the first time I saw him disrespect a book, if I remember correctly. I might be misremembering, but certainly in my head, that's what happened. And he said, I had to assign that to you. I didn't want to. But in the beginning of that book, when we were all laughing at the poor writing and the terrible theme, it's just an awful book. Sorry, Sounder is an awful book. If you disagree with me, you're wrong, by the way. It just objectively, really ask God, he'll tell you. But he made us take it seriously. Even though he knew it was an awful book, and we knew it was an awful book. He said, no, you're going to do the thing. Like, you're going to do the thing. And I think that made me a better person. And I'm still bitter about it. But I still think it made me a better person. Like, I think it's important. And I think, I like these framings. Look, this framing of postmodernism sucks, okay? There's no such thing as modernism. Let me explain to you technically why in the fashion of communication of words and language, it is impossible to use modernism to describe anything useful and communicate an idea. I mean this technically. This is a technical argument. I'm going to give you a technical argument, okay? Modernism, by the definition and only possible meanings of the word, is always exactly right now. And it is never the past. It is never in the past. It is never the future, and it is never in the future. It is unhelpful to frame things as modernism. It's unhelpful. You cannot name a past period in time as modernism, and you cannot name the current period of time as modernism. It's just a corruption of the language that can't stand. And therefore, postmodernism, such that it exists, is invalid. The postmodern ethos, which is roughly the Kantian critique and nothing more, see my video on postmodernism, scroll up, it's there, is garbage. And it's parasitic, and no good can come from it, and don't engage with it, and the world will be a better place. And that's the thing. Yeah, I think that you can't not train people, and you can't not try to educate them, and you can't not try to educate them online. But proper education comes through the participation with others in the distributed cognition and in the play. Vervaeke would call it serious play. I think that's a serious mistake. It's just play. In the play that allows you to learn. Play is the place where you learn proper participation. That's what it is. You make up games. You embody games. You have fun with games. You interact with games. That's all learning proper participation with yourself, with nature, and with others. Like one of the games we used to play after school is we'd go out in the woods and we do total fantasy games. There were a handful of us we were, of course, made fun of. even in a small private school, which is sort of amazing. Yeah, there were only a handful of us that had the imagination to just go out in the woods and pretend like, I don't even remember, what were we pretending like? This is all before time stuff. Before time is very hard to remember. But it was highly imaginative play, right? It wasn't rule-based play. Very different type of play. Not that we didn't play Dungeons and Dragons too,
Right.
but we preferred to run out in the woods and pretend like we were, Lord of the Rings or whatever.
Well, yeah,
We all read.
we were ninjas. We picked up our cartoon series and we each took a role, and then we just went on whatever the heck adventures we did.
Right. Yeah, we did similar stuff to that, and I actually invented a whole martial art called Kitty Ninja. So there you go. It's like that. I tried out there. Oh, it was a total riot. Yeah, we had these. They were poles for like an outdoor tent, not tent, an outdoor lanai or something. I don't know why we had a lanai in New England, but we did. And the poles were like attached with a bracket, so they were together and they could fold together and stuff. But they were attached by this bracket. But what you did was you put the bracket over and then you used the poles and did pole fighting. It was very funny. That was part of your Kitty Ninja training. And I bet you're all jealous you didn't learn Kitty Ninja from me, the Kitty Ninja master. So you missed out. I'm not doing lessons anymore, but I mean, if you come up with enough cash, maybe I can make it happen.
That sounds like a great addition to the ecology of practices. So maybe
Well, this is to some extent, though, Richard. I mean, that's funny and you laugh, but to some extent, that's why I'm attracted to ecologies of practices, because I've been making them up my whole freaking life, to some extent, right? Because again, like I am a clueless. I'm not an NONES of the type of traumatized Jewish, Christian, whatever. I'm an NONES. Didn't engage in religion. Have no idea what that was about. Hardly ever went to church, never understood any of it, didn't read the Bible. So what do you do? Well, I mean, you need liturgy. So like that happens, right? These things emerge, right? And so ethics has to happen. Look, I love what Paul Vanderklay says. There are no homeless atheists, right? You live in your car and you don't have food and you can barely, survive actually in the winter in New England in your car. Because this was my life for a while, and you have migraines, you can't sleep more than 2 hours at a shot, you can't sleep more than 4 hours in a 24-hour period. You work your ethics out real quick, or nobody ever hears about you again because you kill yourself. No, really. That's how the world is. So I worked it out.
Huh. Well, yeah, because I wonder if intelligence has influence over that, because I can't remember if was Chris McCandless an atheist. He probably never said. I don't know. But they're definitely not all strict Christians, for sure. But they definitely believe in something.
Well, that's the problem. Religion's inevitable. Everybody believes in something. The question is, how does that manifest? And does it manifest in this, quote, secularity? I don't think that's possible. Because secularity is a contrast to the religious engagement, in my opinion. Like explicitly, that's definitionally what it is. And then it's like, well, what religion are you part of? Because, as I like to say, and I hope everybody spreads this quote all around the world all the time, if you believe you do not have a religion, one will be provided to you without your knowledge or consent.
Mm-hmm.
Religion is inevitable. You're going to be enacting a religion. You'd better know what that is, because it is moving everything you do. Every action you take is informed by whatever religion you are embedded in. And you have to be embedded in a religion. And this is the way that ancient Greeks understood the things. Like they knew that philosophy was embedded within a religion. And so philosophy for them, and I am going to do a video about this. I've been talking about it long enough. I don't know if I can do it off the top of my head, but I could do it with some notes. Philosophy for them was constrained by religion and was designed to provide ontologies, right? So the philosophy bucket consists of ontologies, and those ontologies, like natural science, allow you to justify your behavior within your value system that you're getting from your religion. What philosophy does not do is give you a value system explicitly to the ancient Greeks. That's why I like the ancient Greek definition of philosophy and the way they used it. And I think the modern definition is garbage, and it should be thrown out immediately. And we should go back to the ancient Greek conception because it provides a simple, clear, concise way of understanding these things. It's one that people don't like, that they're rebelling against. I talked about resentment earlier in the stream. We have a lot of resentment and anger because people have been told they're individuals and they're not, and they can't be, and that's not an option. But like, get over it and figure it out, because it's really important that you understand these concepts. Oh, so we've got a question about my dragon. I will tell the story of my dragon. Okay, so where's this dragon over here over my shoulder? That dragon is probably, well, I want to say how old it is. I got that dragon probably when I was 15 years old or 14 years old. That dragon came from the French festival in Biddeford, Maine called La Kermesse, because the French Canadians are a riot and poke the French all the time. At the time that La Kermesse was running, I believe it ran for like 35 years or something. I believe it was the largest festival, a French festival outside of French Canada A. And if you don't say A after saying French Canada, you're saying it wrong. I just grammatical, corrections. So it was a big carnival, and you could win prizes. And I used to win stupid prizes like this. This is one of my favorites. I only recently unpacked it. I did have it up in my old house for a while, but I had packed almost all that. I've got a ton of those things still from way back when I was a teenager. I won them at the carnivals, and maybe into my early 20s. We went to La Kermesse for quite a few years. It's a very big family thing to go up to the beach house in Maine, in Biddeford, right around La Kermesse, and then go attend La Kermesse, because that was our French Heritage Festival, right? And we had this band called C'est Si Bon, and C'est Si Bon would play all kinds of interesting, folky music. And I asked Jonathan Peugeot about C'est Si Bon when I was at Thunder Bay. He's like, no, but a lot of this stuff, is very local. And then he said, and maybe I'm projecting, but I don't think so. He said, sort of snidely, like, oh, they sound Acadian. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, maybe I'm Acadian. I don't think I am, but I have no idea. But yeah, it was just interesting. The French Canadians are too disjointed to rise up and take over the world, which I actually did ask Peugeot about explicitly. I was like, are the chosen people, the French Canadians, going to rise up and take over the world? It's almost exactly what I said. And he's like, no. I'm like, God damn. It's like, come on. I placed all my eggs in that basket, because I'm half French Canadian. I figured half of me at least, right? But he's like, no, they're too fractured. They're a bunch of crazy people. I'm like, damn it. So I was bummed out. Maybe I'll go up there and rally the troops and create a united French Canada so that we can take over and fix the world. Someone's got to do it, and it's impossible. So I can do it. It sounds like a better idea every time I think about it. It's too cold up there, though, when I'm too sick with my Raynaud's and my stupid freaking immune illness. You got to stay down here in the warm South Carolina weather. Although it's been freaking cold lately. What is this wintry thing that we seem to have? We had a nice mild summer, and now we have a cold winter. Yeah, that's the story of the dragon. So I've had it in my possession forever. There's a box in the living room. It's still there, full of more of that type of thing, although the rest are cheesier. This is one of the nicer things that I wanted at La Kermesse. And yeah, I'm redoing the office of the La Kermesse badges because I have a bunch of them around somewhere, but they're not even in this room anymore. But they'll come back. I'll set them out in the office somewhere. I am glad that was enjoyable. I have lots of crazy, silly stories like that, although I can't remember most of them. Reasons. The before time is hard. I can hear some of JP's influence on Prager's radio show talking points, but I don't know if the exchange is worth it. Every time Prager talks about his rational Bible, I cringe. Yeah, I mean, Prager is also sort of trapped in the rationality framing, which I hate. And it's really annoying. Like, again, I mean, this is my argument with Jacob earlier about theology. Theology bad. Like, there's no reason for it. Like, just stop. Please stop. Stop fighting the scientists with their sciencey science garbage. And start just telling them they suck because they can't do virtues and values. And like, you know, like, I mean, not to say shove it up their ass, but oh no, that's exactly what I'm gonna say. Like, shove it right up their ass. If they think they can do it, bring the goods. You know, if you think there's a freaking nomological order, then tell me what it is so I can freaking slice and dice your idiotic idea in front of you until you cry. I'm happy with that. I like to win. You know, I'm all good. Like, don't. This is the problem. The church has receded, and it's like giving ground up. Like, don't give up that ground. You are the land of ethics. Like, this is what you do. Keep doing it. And if anybody says anything about it, tell them to F off and die twice. Like, I don't get it. Like, it's not hard. They can't, Sam Harris can't bring you ethics and morality. He just says he can. He never does the trick. These people don't have that. The church should say, this is our domain. Our distributed cognition through time has provided us with this. And therefore, take your logic, your reason, and your rationality and stuff it where the sun don't shine. Keep it over here where it belongs. Don't bring it over here where it can't be useful. Like, there's nothing wrong with putting things in the box and drawing the boundaries. And the church isn't doing that. They're not holding the line anymore. And someone has to. And now we have to fight them back. Oh, man. So tiring. Come on, Richard, enlighten us. What do you think about this? The science lab leak from the Protestant Reformation.
I mean, like, it's tough because, like, so, because basically what that boils down to is the argument of if you're not religious, then you'll be evil.
Well, you're more likely to be. Yeah,
Right.
I think that's true. I think Sam Harris proved it.
Oh, wait, how?
On trigonometry, when he said he didn't care about the dead baby bodies in the basement. Like, really? Okay, that's evil, dude. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just is. Like, 4 seconds, evil confirmed. Like, not hard.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, and then it's like, yeah, the atheists take away the grounding for their own morals, etc., etc. But then it's like I mean, like, I'm still stuck in the rationalist framework somewhat because, like, if you take that path and you say that the church is the place that gives the nomological order, then you're relying on revelation effectively, and my atheist brain cringes when I think that. But,
well, I don't think it gives nomological order. I don't think there's any such thing, but I think it gives narrative order. And that's where nomological order emerges from. I mean, that was Peterson's argument, roughly speaking.
Yeah.
And by church, I don't mean the church administration. I mean the body of Christ, like all the people, right? Because that's really what it is. And I did want to address this. Did you guys catch the Vervaeke Hoffman on The Reality of Everything?
I had to watch that.
I can't stand Donald Hoffman at all because he just needs to read a philosophy book like once ever. Like, I don't understand these people. Like, I'm not well read, but like, I kind of know some of this stuff is like answered in some of these books. And, like, even some of this, and I love John Vervaeke, but some of the stuff he says about Buddhism, I'm like, dude, I read that book and you missed whole chapters clearly. Like, you just missed it. I don't know what else to say. Like your reading comprehension is terrible or something, because it doesn't say that. It says the
Or-
opposite.
Or he read too fast.
Or you read it too fast. Exactly. It could be. I don't know. Like some people, they just don't, like, they skip past stuff. Like they're, you know, there's no
Castro.
gods. There's no gods in Buddhism. What? Are you high? Yes, there are. Like, what are you talking about? Buddhist temples have icons in them that represent specific spirits that are representative of specific material aspects of the world.
And aren't the gods?
We can argue about the meaning of God at that point, but like for all intents and purposes, Buddhists worship gods. I don't know what else to tell you about it.
Yeah, there's gods in the story of Siddhartha, right?
It's
Some-
all over the place. Like
Right.
Buddha is called the Godhead. I don't know what else to, like, what book are you reading? Like, really? Like, where did you get this garbage from? You complete nutbags, right? I call it a half-theist religion, to be fair to it, right? Because it sort of says, like, well, you're supposed to catch up to the Buddha on the road, and then you're basically supposed to kill him and move on. Oh, you're fair enough. But that's half-theism. You're a theist half the time. Oh, okay, whatever. I don't care, right? But you know, these guys, Kastrup's got the same problem. Like Hoffman just restates well-known, like actual well-known by people like me who deliberately read zero philosophy, almost zero philosophy, to be resolved as they can get. Not scientifically resolved, that's a different problem. Resolved issues. Like Hoffman's the kind of guy who says, well, you know, really what science has discovered is that, you know, the last question is if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a noise? It's like, dude, this is not a scientific question. He's got dozens of them. Bernardo Kastrup's a nutbag, right? Like Joshua Bach. These guys say things. I watched them on Twitter and stuff, and I'm like, are you guys like did you not go to school? Like, I don't understand. Like, if you went to a school and you went to a college and you're talking like this, either you skipped a bunch of classes, or your reading and comprehension is terrible, or you forgot a bunch of stuff. Like, how did you get out of high school? Really? Like, honestly, it's very frustrating.
Like it's them trying to be edgy. It's probably what it is more.
No, they're not. No, I don't think so. I think they're clueless, and they keep saying retarded things that are clearly philosophical and resolved.
No, I think they went to high school, they went to undergraduate philosophy, and they read one or two things that allowed them to be contrarian. And why not be contrarian?
Or maybe if they studied modern philosophy, or so-called modern philosophy,
Right.
then maybe. Yeah, the closest, and you know what's really funny? So I'm rewatching Andromeda, and I said this earlier. Like, episode 2 of Andromeda is meaning crisis, and I was just like, oh, this is so funny. It's meaning crisis, right? I mean, he uses the word meaning, like it's right there. It's beautiful. If you haven't seen Andromeda, it's awesome.
I haven't.
Great series. So modern science fiction, in my opinion, is as close as you get to ancient Greek philosophy. And that may seem like a wild claim, but it's not. And let me explain to you why.
Mhm.
Ancient Greeks conducted philosophy in the following fashion. They would put forth a set of axioms that they did not believe or think was correct on purpose. And they would proceed from that as if it was true in order to explore or exemplify one or two virtues or values, right? And so And so what is modern science fiction? Okay, modern science fiction is coming up with a fake world that you know is fake. Whether it's plausible or not is actually irrelevant in science fiction, because some science fiction is very plausible, some science fiction is very not plausible, and that changes over time because technology, right? But they gin up a world. Maybe it's a world where there's a vessel that you can take and go under the ocean, right? There's Jules Verne, right? Or maybe it's a world where you go to a planet and there are talking dogs. Okay, there are books like this, right? These are books and short stories. I read some, not a lot, because I'm not very well read, because I read real slow. We went over this earlier, dyslexic. But I've read a fair amount of science fiction, and I think that's where all my philosophy comes from, right? Because look, Andromeda is great. Andromeda is like, they're not hiding the ball. One of the races in the show Andromeda are the Nietzscheans. No, really, and they're hysterically funny, by the way. But there's all kinds of philosophical in jokes. There's probably twice as many that I don't get, but I get some of them. Like, there's all this stuff in there. But, people are like, oh, you didn't read philosophy. How did you come to all this stuff? I engage with real philosophy in the form of science fiction, right? Because they're doing that. They're saying, what would the world be like? And even Star Trek to some degree, Next Generation less so, the classic Star Trek more so. They did these philosophical explorations through the medium. Like, you use science fiction. So classic Star Trek, one of the best episodes ever of classic Star Trek. Can't remember the name of it, because I don't have the names memorized for classic Star Trek for many, many reasons. There is a woman who is a pure empath, and any pain you have, she can take on herself and heal you. And it's an amazing episode, because it's such a fun idea to play with.
Right.
It's not real. Duh. It's not supposed to be real, but it does allow you to play with the moral and ethical implications of being in that situation and what that means.
Right, yeah, and so in the philosophy of mind class, we watched the Star Trek episode of Data being prosecuted. Yeah, of
The
Data
trial?
The trial.
The trial to see whether or not he could be treated as an android, or if he had to be treated like a sentient being. Yeah, that was
Right, exactly, and like that was us using Star Trek in an actual college level philosophy class. So,
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, and a lot of those stories are based on the ancient Greek. So there's another one in classic Star Trek, and I can't remember any of these names. I don't know why. Where the god Apollo is there. Like, no, really. Like, it's the god Apollo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen this. Yeah.
Well, and they're exploring religion. What's the nature of religion? Oh, if people fail to believe in the god vanishes, roughly speaking. I mean, that's a cheap, dirty synopsis. It's a great episode you got to watch. Every classic Star Trek episode should be watched by everyone, because as far as I'm concerned, that's basic learning. Also, the science fiction program, I'm also rewatching this. I've watched it dozens and dozens of times. Blake 7, if you can find it. It's an old late 70s, early 80s science fiction. It is the best science fiction program ever put to TV. Bad special effects. Thank you, England, BBC. But the philosophy in that is so awesome. I mean, so there's a main character in there called Avon, and he's in more episodes than Blake. Don't ask BBC. England sucks. That was my handle online. So a lot of people actually, a non-trivial number of people actually know me as Avon online, because that was one of my handles online, because I love that character so much. And, why don't you show you care? And he's like, I don't know why it should be necessary to show that you care. I don't know why it would be necessary that I show that I care, or why it would be necessary at all to show that you care, sort of a thing. Like, what? In other words, my actions should show you that I care. Why should I put in additional work? Like, that makes no sense. And there's little tidbits like that in that series that are just fantastic. But yeah, a lot of the stuff is deliberately ripped off and updated from the ancient Greek philosophical musings, and that's great. But still, maybe just engage with Plato and be done with it. And a lot of Plato is learning. A lot of Socrates is learning. A lot of this stuff is there, but we're not engaging with it correctly, because, as I pointed out in my education versus training video, right, we've taken the participation out of school, roughly speaking.
Yeah, Plato is also not easy to read, I must say. So there's also that. But
I wish I could remember the books that I've read and haven't read, and I may have my Buddhism books. They might have gotten stolen by evil people, but they might be in the shed. I don't know. And I might be emptying all of my books out of the shed. I don't know if I can empty all of them out of the shed. I do have quite a few. I haven't read all of them. So having quite a few books doesn't mean I read them. Um, oh yeah, deities and gods. Yeah. Look, these explorations are there in the TV. You don't need to, you know, you don't need to engage with books. Damn it, burn all the books. All right, back to burning books. It's all good.
Terrible
But
idea.
if you engage with just the book and you don't do it with a group of people, are you getting educated or are you just getting trained? I know it's an open question. I'm not making a statement. I'm just saying.
But
Are you doing exploration of the material? Like, are you being forced to write a chapter? You know what I mean? Like, are you discussing it? Because if you're doing that, you're getting an education.
well, yeah,
But if
yeah.
you're just being, if you're
Yeah.
just saying, read this book and believe it, that's training and propaganda.
Oh,
But you know what it isn't? It isn't education.
No, you're not told to believe the books at all. One, because the books contradict each other, so that wouldn't make sense. So basically, what it is you have to read the book, and you have to take notes on the book. And you know, throughout your 4 years, they try and train you how to take better notes on books.
Right.
in general. But notes is your way of engaging with the text. And then you come into a class of about 15 people, and there's a professor there, and the professor asks a broad, well, not broad, always.
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's the thing. If you're participating in that way, then it's education. So books is a psychotech. No, actually, I'm going to get really radical and say books is a degradation out of a psychotechnology. The psychotechnology is writing, right? But what you should be doing, and this is actually in some of the ancient Greek practices and some of the pagan practices for that matter, writing things down and then burning them. Write it down, memorize it, burn it. Like that's an actual practice. That would be a psychotechnology. Writing's a psychotechnology. Books is not. It's a degradation. Socrates and Plato both thought this. Like Plato wasn't into books. It's like, don't write this stuff down, man. You can't. You know, Vervaeke points this out all the time. It's beautiful, right? The Plato and Aristotle spent more time in the gym than in the academy. Like that's the thing. Dialogos is a psychotech. I think Dialogos is a psychotech. Why? Because you're practicing distributed cognition. And distributed cognition is an upgrade from individual cognition, which don't think for yourself. You can't think for yourself. See Jacob's video. It's great on propaganda. You can't think for yourself. That is true. You cannot think for yourself. That's not happening. But it is that discussion, that interaction with the other students and with the teacher that makes it education.
Well, and then we also get the writing part as well, because you're required to write. They call it a poll question. So the professor will give 1 to 3 questions about the text, and then you have to write a 300 to 600 word response to that for each book. Just you pick one question, and then each semester you also have to write a paper for a chosen topic of at least 2,500 words. The word count increases each semester you go, but writing, you know, a big part of the program is reading, speaking, writing, right? And those are the big 3 things it's trying to teach you to do, to educate you to do. So, yeah, not a bad program at all, I'd say.
Right, then that's good. That's educating. Like if that's what you're doing, then that's education, and that's good. But it does matter also what you're being educated in, right? Because if you're being taught critical theory in that way, then that's not good. Because critical theory is garbage.
No, like what did we read this semester? We did the Iliad, the Odyssey, we did Sophocles, we did History of the Peloponnesian War, we did Aristotle, we did Plato.
Oh, good. All right. So you're getting a classical education.
Yeah, I am.
Right? That's what I care about. I don't like this term humanities. So what's this comment? I'm always like, hey, I'm doing the exact same thing that I'm criticizing. I've noticed a lot of recursion and hypocrisy in myself. Well, yeah, you do, but you know what? Hypocrisy is not necessarily a bad thing and is probably inevitable, right?
At least you're
look, this is easy. People think it's hard. It's easy. Believe it or not, like, hold on to your horses. We don't live in a perfect world, and we're not gonna. It's not gonna happen. Okay, it's not gonna happen. We're not gonna live in a perfect world. It's not an option. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means that we live in an imperfect world. When the standard is everything has to be perfect, hypocrisy is everywhere. It has to be, because we don't live in a perfect world. Okay, but hypocrisy is not everywhere, because it is perfectly reasonable to say thou shalt not kill. Okay, and then end up realizing that that's not a possible situation to avoid in all cases for all people at all times throughout the course of history, right? So at that point, you kind of realize that hypocrisy is inevitable. And the question is, are you just being hypocritical? And that would look something like, am I engaging in the world in a way that I am violating my own principles? That's a problem. That might seem like hypocrisy, but it's way worse, right? If it's, well, thou shalt not kill, and then somebody attacks your family, like with a deadly weapon, and you kill them, are you a hypocrite? I don't think so somehow. Like, I don't think that applies. If it's the exception to the rule, that's what proves the rule. That's not hypocrisy. If it's too often, and I don't care to define that, then it's hypocrisy. Now, this is one of the problems of postmodernism, see my video, is that we get into this critiquing cycle that we can't get out of. We get into this parasitic cycle that we can't end. And that's a problem. And we shouldn't do that. We should be careful about that. We should, we should avoid postmodernism, the civilization destroying mind virus, at all costs.
Yeah.
All right, Richard, I'm pretty tired, so I'm going to close it down. What do you got for closing statements, sir?
My closing statement is that I am also tired. So, I'm also going to go to bed. So, but it was good talking to you. I'm glad that my education is a good education. I was wondering that. But yeah, what I suspected was true, is that it is. And now I have to watch Star Trek as well.
Good. Watch Star Trek, watch Andromeda, watch Blake 7, all good stuff. And look, I mean, some people will educate themselves, and that's why I have no fear for whatever you're taking, because it's not gonna. You're gonna get on the right path for sure, because you have the right level of curiosity and the right mind to engage. And that's the issue, is that people that don't have that are going to be prone to propaganda and brainwashing and all sorts of wacky stuff. But you're not one of those people, so I'm not too worried about it. But I'm glad to know that you're in a good school that's doing what I would consider the right thing. I think I can justify considering that the right thing on things that aren't not the right thing. And I'm glad you engaged, because it's always good to have help. And maybe I'll start enforcing a rule that you can't come on without a monocle or something. But now, I don't need everybody to be a pirate. I can just be the lead pirate that runs the ship, cyberpunkish and all.
Yes, I am not opposed. So I will look into it and see what I can do.
$10 on Amazon, my friend, and it's beautiful. I like the blue. It's got blue. It's got these.
Yeah. They're secondary lenses.
Yeah.
Can you move them up and down?
Oh yeah, everything moves. Yeah. Although I can't. I gotta look at this. There we go. Where am I? There we go. Oh yeah, it all moves. It works.
Yeah.
I put this in front. I can't see a damn thing. Yeah. I mean, in theory, I could if it helped. No, two of them makes it worse. They are actual magnifying glasses, though. Plus, it's blue, so it's funny because one eye's covered and one's covered in
Right.
blue, right?
Right.
The other eye's not covered, so I get this weird thing when I'm reading the screen, and then I've got my freaking tripod in the way. I gotta fix this camera setup. So yeah, it's kind of wacky, but hopefully, hopefully everybody appreciates my having fun with live navigating live patterns instead of navigating non-live patterns. But thanks everyone for joining, and I was so glad to see Teo. And if Jacob can stop causing trouble, that would be nice. But I don't think he can help himself. We'll see if he can train himself up.
You and Jacob.
We love Jacob anyway. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope to see you all next week because I'm going to do this again. And suggestions are welcome. You can put them in the comments or whatnot down below. And always love the engagement, and I hope you all find it useful too. Sounds like you do, so I'll keep doing it as long as I think it's useful.
Goodbye, people.
Arrgh.